The city of Paris sleeps uneasily beneath a pale October moon. It is the year 1307. From the narrow streets to the grand towers of the Isle de la Cite, a strange silence hangs in the air, the kind that comes before storm. Suddenly, the sound of hooves shatters the stillness. Dozens of riders, bearing the royal crest of France, thunder through the cobbled lanes, their torches cutting streaks of gold through the fog. Behind bar doors, people whisper. They know something is coming, though none can imagine how history is about to change forever. At dawn, the bells of Notre Dame toll, not for mass, but for judgment. Soldiers surround the Templar commandery, the stronghold of one of the most powerful organizations in medieval Christendom. The Knights Templar, sworn protectors of pilgrims and defenders of the Holy Land, are roused from their beds by the clang of steel and the pounding of fists. Armor half-fastened, cloaks thrown over bare shoulders, they stumble into the courtyard where the king's men wait with orders signed in the name of Philip IV. The charge is treason against God. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the order, stands among them, gray-haired, dignified, calm even in chaos. He looks upon the soldiers not with fear, but with confusion and sorrow. For decades, the Templars have served church and crown alike. They have fought, bled, and died in the name of faith. And yet, here they are, betrayed by the very powers they once protected. The torches illuminate their red crosses, symbols once honored across Christendom. Now those same symbols mark them for death. As each knight is bound in chains, the silence deepens, broken only by the muffled prayers of men who have already accepted their fate. The command comes to search every chest, every parchment, every sealed chamber. But the soldiers find little more than relics, scrolls, and old maps, until one officer emerges from the chapel, holding something that makes even the king's representative hesitate. A small casket, engraved with strange sigils, a design unfamiliar to the church. When asked what it contains, a captured knight replies simply, "Not treasure, prophecy." The words ripple through the air like a curse. That single word, prophecy, will haunt the investigation, the trials, and the very memory of the Templars. Within hours, arrests spread across France. Hundreds of knights are dragged from their homes and fortresses. The papal envoys, blindsided by Philip's sudden strike, scramble to understand what has happened. In truth, this was no spontaneous act of justice. The plan had been months in the making, built on rumors, forged confessions, and the king's own desperation for power and gold. But there is something deeper behind the king's fury, something personal. For years, whispers had reached the royal court. The Templars were said to hold a secret so great it could unseat the papacy itself, a revelation discovered long ago beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. The legend claimed that the order's founders uncovered not gold or relics, but knowledge that the church had buried for centuries. Some said it was a scroll written in an ancient hand. Others claimed it was a relic so sacred that even to speak of it invited damnation. Whatever it was, it became known among the Templars as the prophecy of the temple. As day breaks, smoke rises above the Paris commandery. The prisoners are marched through the streets, heads bowed, their once white mantles stained with dirt. The people watch, unsure whether to pity or curse them. The church orders mass prayers for the cleansing of heresy, but among the crowd are those who remember what the Templars once were: heroes, crusaders, guardians of the faith. For them, this feels less like justice and more like the erasing of history. Inside the royal palace, Philip IV listens to his ministers describe the arrests with satisfaction. Yet even he cannot shake the unease that follows. The accusations, worshipping idols, spitting on the cross, consorting with demons, sound absurd, even to him. But the rumors of the prophecy gnawed his ambition. What if the Templars truly possessed something that could expose the Church's deepest secrets? What if their silence hid a truth powerful enough to shatter kingdoms? Meanwhile, in the dungeons beneath Paris, Jacques de Molay kneels in prayer. The air is thick with damp and fear. A young scribe, recording confessions for the Inquisition, hesitates as he looks at the Grand Master's face, serene, almost defiant. "Do you deny the charges?" the Inquisitor asks. Molay lifts his head, eyes glinting in the candlelight. "I deny nothing that serves God," he says quietly. "But what you seek cannot be destroyed by fire or steel." That night, the casket seized from the Templar chapel disappears from royal custody. Some claim it was taken to the Vatican. Others believe loyal Templars smuggled it away through secret tunnels beneath the city. No record of its contents was ever found. All that remains is a single note in the archives, item confiscated, of great danger to the faith. By week's end, the Templars are no more. Their castles fall, their riches are seized, and their name becomes synonymous with heresy. Yet even as the order burns, their legend begins to grow. Across Europe, whispers spread of a secret not yet buried, a prophecy the knights swore to protect even at the cost of their lives. As the flames of the pyres flicker across the Seine, Parisians swear they hear chanting, low and rhythmic, echoing from the imprisoned knights. Others claim to see strange lights above the river, drifting like pale lanterns toward the east. In the chronicles of the age, these events are dismissed as superstition. But to those who remember the power of the Templars, one truth becomes clear: whatever they guarded beneath Jerusalem did not die with them. And so begins the story of the forbidden prophecy of the Knights Templar, a mystery buried beneath centuries of silence, deceit, and faith. The night the temple burned was not merely the end of an order. It was the beginning of a secret that refused to die. In the damp darkness of the Paris prison, Jacques de Molay sits alone. His hands, once callous from the sword, are now bound in heavy iron chains. The cell smells of ash and old blood. Through the narrow slit of a window, the faint light of dawn filters in, a reminder of a world that has already turned against him. Days have passed since his arrest, yet he has not spoken a single word beyond prayer. His silence unnerves his captors, for they expected confession, fear, or anger. Instead, they find calm, a kind of peace that no torture can disturb. The guards whisper about him. Some say he is a sorcerer, others that he carries the protection of God himself. One night, as the jailer peers into his cell, he finds de Molay tracing a symbol into the dirt, a circle intersected by a cross. The man spits, cursing him for blasphemy, but the Grand Master does not react. He only murmurs softly, "The light endures beneath the stone." The words mean nothing to the guard, but to the Templars who once followed him. They're sacred, a fragment of a prayer older than the order itself. Outside, the Inquisition prepares for its trials. Interrogators trained in extracting truth from pain sharpen their instruments and ready their scripts. They do not seek knowledge, they seek obedience. They want the Grand Master to confess that the Templars were heretics, that they denied Christ, worshipped idols, and spat on the cross. Yet what they truly desire is his submission. If Jacques de Molay breaks, the order's legacy will die with him. The first interrogation begins in the great hall of the royal fortress. Candles drip wax over the stones, casting long, trembling shadows. De Molay stands before a tribunal of priests and inquisitors. His body bears the marks of sleeplessness, yet his voice is steady. "Grandmaster," the lead inquisitor says, "you are accused of grave sins against the Church. Speak truthfully, and perhaps you may be spared." De Molay lifts his gaze. "Truth," he replies, "is not yours to grant or to spare." A murmur ripples through the hall. The inquisitor frowns. "Then you admit there are truths beyond the Church?" The old knight pauses, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. "There are truths beneath it." The phrase lands like a thunderclap. Beneath it. The words carry a hidden meaning, one only a Templar would understand. A reference to Jerusalem, to the chambers beneath the Temple Mount where, centuries earlier, the first knights had uncovered something that changed them forever. The inquisitors press him with questions about idols, rituals, and strange relics. But de Molay gives them nothing. When they show him crude sketches of the alleged Templar idol known as Baphomet, he studies the parchment silently. Then he looks up and says, "You name what you do not understand. That which gives light is not evil merely because you fear the fire." His words echo through the chamber, unsettling even the priests who came convinced of his guilt. The torture begins soon after. He is stretched upon a rack, his shoulders tearing, his breath reduced to broken gasps. The inquisitor leans close and demands again, "What secret did you guard beneath the temple?" De Molay's lips tremble, not from pain, but from effort, as if choosing words carefully. "It was not a secret," he whispers. "It was a promise." Then he falls silent once more. No amount of pain can force another word. The record of that day ends there, with a single note from the scribe. The accused refuses further speech, shows no sign of fear. Days turn into weeks. The king grows impatient. Pope Clement hesitates to approve the executions, troubled by the lack of confession. The political tide begins to shift. Rumors spread that de Molay's silence hides something the Church itself cannot face. In Rome, a cardinal writes privately, "The master of the temple keeps his tongue for a reason." Perhaps his silence is the greatest heresy of all. At last, after months of imprisonment, Jacques de Molay is brought once more before the tribunal, this time in public upon the steps of Notre Dame. A crowd gathers to witness the humiliation of the once mighty Grand Master. His beard is unkempt, his garments torn, yet there is a strange dignity about him still. The inquisitor reads the charges: heresy, idolatry, conspiracy against the Church. Then he offers mercy in exchange for repentance. De Molay listens, unmoved. When the time comes to answer, he steps forward, the chains clinking like a bell toll. "My brothers are dead," he says, voice calm and low. "Our name is ash, but truth cannot be burned. You call me heretic, but it is not God who fears what lies beneath Jerusalem." The crowd stirs, a mix of awe and confusion. The inquisitor demands to know what he means, but de Molay only repeats, "The light beneath the temple will rise when the world is ready." It is the last public statement he ever makes. The Church censors record it as the ravings of a condemned man, deleting references to light and prophecy. But the phrase survives, passed in whispers among those who still believe in the order's purity. As the sun sets over Paris, de Molay is returned to his cell. Alone once again, he kneels on the cold floor, facing east toward Jerusalem. The candle burns low beside him, its flame quivering in the draught. He whispers a final prayer, not for himself, but for the secret he swore to protect. His silence, he knows, is all that stands between the world and a truth not yet ready to be seen. Outside, the guards hear him speaking softly and lean closer, but the words are too faint to make out. Some claim he was calling to God. Others say he was speaking to someone or something far older. When the candle finally dies, darkness fills the cell, and the man who once commanded thousands is swallowed by shadow. Yet even in silence, Jacques de Molay's defiance becomes legend. His lips may never open again, but his words, and the secret they conceal, have already begun to echo beyond the grave. Long before the flames consumed the Templars in Paris, their story began in a world of faith and dust, a world where heaven and earth seemed perilously close. The year was 1119. The Holy Land was a battlefield, and the blood of pilgrims stained the roads that wound through the hills of Jerusalem. Every step from Jaffa to the Holy City was haunted by danger, raiders, bandits, and the ghosts of fallen crusaders. The Crusades had opened the gates of the East to the armies of Christendom, but the victory was fragile, and faith was no shield against the blade. Amid this chaos, 9 knights swore an oath that would reshape the medieval world forever. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. They were men of nobility, veterans of the First Crusade, who traded their estates and comforts for vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Their purpose was simple yet divine: to protect pilgrims on their way to the Holy Sepulchre. They owned nothing, slept in rags, and ate from wooden bowls. Their first lodging was not a castle or fortress, but a ruined wing of the old Temple of Solomon, gifted to them by King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. From this sacred ruin, their name, the Knights of the Temple, was born. The people saw them as holy warriors, defenders of the faith who bridged the divide between monk and soldier. They prayed like monks but fought like lions. At dawn, they knelt before makeshift altars, whispering Latin prayers. At noon, they rode into battle with the same quiet fervor. To them, death was not defeat, it was communion with God. Chroniclers wrote of their discipline, their refusal to retreat, their unshakable unity. They fight, one priest observed, not for glory, but for the salvation of souls. Yet beneath this holy purpose, something else was taking root, a deeper calling, unspoken but powerful. For within the ruins of Solomon's temple, where the knights built their home, ancient whispers lingered. Local pilgrims spoke of buried chambers, sealed passages, and hidden vaults left untouched since the days of the prophets. The earliest Templars, led by Hugues de Payens and Geoffrey de Saint-Omer, seemed drawn to the ruins not only for refuge, but for revelation. For years, they rarely appeared in public. They excavated beneath the temple, their activities cloaked in secrecy. Some believed they were searching for relics of Christ. Others thought they sought treasure. But those who knew them closely sensed their purpose was spiritual or perhaps prophetic. When the Templars finally emerged from their years of silence, something had changed. Their demeanor was graver, their eyes more intense. They no longer spoke merely of protection, but of destiny. They claimed to have found something of great holiness beneath the temple, though they never revealed what. Soon after, their fortunes began to rise with impossible speed. The Church, which had once ignored them, suddenly embraced them. Pope Honorius granted them independence from local bishops, allowing them to act beyond the Church's normal reach. Donations flowed in from across Europe, lands, gold, and the loyalty of nobles. The poor Knights of Christ had become an international order with power rivaling kingdoms. Their black and white banner, Bucient, became a symbol of divine duality, purity and penance, light and shadow. They were feared and revered in equal measure. To some, they embodied God's will on earth. To others, they were a dangerous cult wrapped in sanctity. Yet the knights themselves remained secretive, bound by oaths few dared question. The initiation rituals of the order were whispered about, but never witnessed by outsiders. Every Templar swore to absolute silence regarding what he had seen or learned within the order's ranks. It was said that in the ceremony, the initiate was shown a relic or truth that tested his faith to its limits. Those who faltered never returned to service. As the Crusades raged on, the Templars became indispensable. Their discipline turned the tide in battles that should have been lost. They built fortresses so advanced that even Muslim generals admired their design. Their network stretched from Jerusalem to London, from Cairo to Paris. And with this network came immense wealth. Through letters of credit and trade routes, the Templars accidentally created the first form of international banking, a system that allowed nobles and pilgrims to deposit gold in one city and withdraw it in another. But the irony was bitter. Though sworn to poverty, the Templars became the richest order in Christendom. This contradiction did not go unnoticed. Jealous monks whispered that the knights had abandoned their vows. Kings began to fear their growing independence. The Templars answered to no crown, no bishop, only to their Grand Master and the Pope himself. Even the most powerful rulers treated them with caution. But behind their armored silence, a question lingered. What had transformed 9 humble knights into a force feared by empires? According to later accounts, it all returned to what they had found beneath the temple. In letters now lost, but once mentioned by chroniclers, a few early Templars hinted that their discovery had not been gold or relics, but knowledge, something that proved the light of God had been misunderstood. This phrase would haunt the order's legend for centuries. If the Templars had indeed uncovered forbidden truths buried beneath Jerusalem, it might explain their sudden rise and their eventual fall. As the Holy Land changed hands and Jerusalem slipped once more from Christian rule, the Templars' purpose blurred. They were no longer just warriors. They were guardians of something unseen, something that transcended the battlefield. In the grand halls of their commanderies, among relics and scrolls, they began to speak not of conquest, but of destiny, a vision whispered only among the highest ranks, foretelling a time when the truth beneath the temple would be revealed to all men. The knights who once fought for Christ were now keepers of a secret. Their swords, once raised against infidels, now guarded something far more dangerous, a prophecy that could unmake the faith they had sworn to defend. And so the Templar story, born in the dust and blood of Jerusalem, grew into something larger than faith itself, a kingdom built not just on fire and devotion, but on mystery. Jerusalem in the 12th century was a city of contradictions, sacred and scarred, shining with faith yet darkened by conquest. Beneath its sunlit streets lay a labyrinth of forgotten chambers, tunnels, and broken stones that had once formed the foundation of Solomon's temple. To the pilgrims who walked above, these ruins were nothing more than remnants of legend. But to the 9 knights who made their home there, they were something far more, the heartbeat of a mystery older than Christianity itself. When the first Templars were granted quarters within the Temple Mount, the decision seemed symbolic, a holy site for a holy brotherhood. Yet their presence there soon took on an unusual character. Rather than fortifying the surface or building anew, the knights spent years digging beneath. The chronicler William of Tyre, writing decades later, would remark that they undertook works of great secrecy, delving deep below the temple, seeking what none but they could name. Even among their fellow crusaders, this behavior raised suspicion. What were the warrior monks searching for beneath the ruins of Solomon's throne? The local workers who aided them spoke of strange discoveries, sealed passageways, inscriptions in an ancient tongue, rooms carved with geometric symbols unlike anything known in Christian or Muslim architecture. Some said the knights uncovered relics from the first temple, hidden when Jerusalem fell to Babylon centuries before Christ. Others whispered of scrolls, writings so old that even the priests could not read them. The Templars themselves said nothing. Each night, they descended into the darkness carrying lamps and tools. Each morning, they emerged silent, their faces drawn, their eyes alight with something that looked like awe or fear. One rumor claimed that on the 7th year of their digging, they found a chamber untouched by time, a vault sealed with stone slabs engraved with the Hebrew word for light. Inside, according to legend, they discovered a series of caskets containing gold, relics, and a peculiar crystal tablet etched with symbols that no one could decipher. Some chroniclers, centuries later, would interpret these symbols as proto-Kabbalistic or even alchemical in nature. But the most intriguing part of the legend lies in what the Templars supposedly found written upon a parchment hidden within the same vault, a prophecy. The so-called Scroll of the Builders, as it came to be known in later retellings, allegedly foretold the rise and fall of kingdoms, the corruption of the church, and a coming age of illumination, when the hidden truth beneath the temple would be revealed to mankind. The prophecy's origin was unclear. It spoke of no Messiah, no Christ, no prophet, only of a light that shines before faith and endures beyond it. If the story is true, it would mean that the Templars had stumbled upon an artifact, not of Christianity, but of a faith far more ancient, perhaps even pre-Abrahamic. Whatever they discovered, it changed them. When the Knights emerged from a vault for the final time, their demeanor was altered. They no longer referred to themselves as mere protectors of pilgrims, but as guardians of the temple. Hugues de Payens, their leader, began sending secret letters to the church, requesting official recognition not as a military band, but as a religious order directly under papal protection. This was an extraordinary demand for 9 impoverished knights, yet somehow it was granted. Historians still debate how they managed to gain the favor of both the church and the nobility in such a short span. But to those who know the legend, the answer is simple. Whatever they found beneath Jerusalem gave them leverage that no one could ignore. In the years that followed, the Templars' fortunes grew rapidly. Their seal, 2 knights riding a single horse, symbolized humility, yet their power spread with uncanny speed. They built commanderies across Europe, developed an unprecedented network of communication, and attracted noble sons from every corner of Christendom. Their influence reached the courts of kings and the chambers of the Vatican. It was as if the hand of Providence itself guided them. But within their ranks, a secret hierarchy began to form. Those who had descended into the vault and those who had not. The initiates who had seen the relics beneath the temple were sworn to absolute secrecy. To them, the prophecy was not myth but revelation. They believed it foretold a cycle of destruction and rebirth, the fall of the old church and the dawn of a purified faith, rooted not in fear but in understanding. From that moment, the Templars were no longer just warriors. They became scholars, mystics, and builders. They studied sacred geometry, ancient languages, and the sciences of the East. Some chroniclers accused them of heresy for this curiosity. Yet to the Templars, knowledge itself was divine. They began incorporating strange symbols into their architecture, interlocking circles, solar patterns, and cryptic inscriptions hidden in the stonework of their chapels. Every fortress they built seemed to echo the design of the temple itself, as if trying to recreate what they had seen in the vault below Jerusalem. Even among their allies, unease grew. The church, though publicly supportive, began to whisper. What if the Knights had uncovered something that contradicted holy doctrine? The Templars' private rituals, their refusal to speak of what lay beneath the temple, their strange reverence for the light of the temple, all fed suspicion. But for the order, secrecy was survival. To reveal what they knew would invite destruction, not just to the Brotherhood, but of the very faith they had sworn to defend. By the middle of the 12th century, as new crusades swept across the Holy Land, the Templars had become indispensable to both kings and popes. Yet deep within their hierarchy, the oldest among them still gathered in shadowed halls to speak of the prophecy. They believed it was their duty to guard it until the appointed time, a moment described in the scroll as the alignment of heaven and earth, when the truth beneath Jerusalem would rise once more. Centuries later, when archaeologists rediscovered the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, they found collapsed chambers, carved niches, and traces of medieval digging, silent proof that the Templars' work had been real. But the vault itself, if it ever existed, remains hidden. Its contents, the relics, the scroll, the light, have never been found. And yet, the legend endures. In every Templar fortress, every carved sigil, there lies a whisper of that first excavation, the moment when 9 knights reached into the dark beneath Jerusalem and pulled out something that would change the world. What they found down there remains a mystery, but one thing is certain. From that moment on, the Templars were no longer searching for God. They believed they had already found him, not in heaven, but beneath the stone floor of the holy city itself. Across Europe, from the windswept hills of Scotland to the sunlit plains of Spain, the Knights Templar began to build. They erected fortresses, chapels, and commanderies with astonishing precision, as if guided by a single architectural mind. To the common eye, these were strongholds of faith and defense, places where warriors prayed, trained, and prepared for the Holy Land. But to those who looked closer, the Templars' architecture whispered of something else, something hidden in the very stones. Each building followed a peculiar geometric harmony. The proportions of their churches echoed ancient ratios, the same golden patterns found in Egyptian temples and Greek sanctuaries. Their round churches, like the Temple Church in London and Lyon in France, were modeled after the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. But some historians now believe these designs were more than imitation. Beneath the familiar Christian symbols, there lay an invisible order. Circles within squares, angles aligned as solstices, and carvings of the 8-pointed star, a symbol as old as Mesopotamia itself. To the uninitiated, these details seemed decorative. To the Templars, they were the language of the divine. They believed that God's blueprint was written in geometry, that the universe itself was constructed by number and proportion. The more they studied, the more they saw sacred patterns everywhere, in the stars, in cathedrals, in the human body. Each stone they laid was an act of devotion, each angle a prayer. Yet behind this devotion lingered a secret purpose, to preserve a knowledge they had unearthed beneath Jerusalem, but in a form that only the worthy could decode. It was said that the Templars carried the vault's light across continents, not as a relic, but as an idea. What they found beneath the temple, they hid again, not underground this time, but in their architecture. Every Templar site became a cipher, a piece of a larger message scattered across the Christian world. The cathedrals they funded, such as Chartres, were filled with mathematical perfection, ratios that mirrored the shape of the Temple Mount and the position of constellations. Some believe that when mapped together, these sites form a great pattern across Europe, a temple of light stretching from Jerusalem to the Atlantic. But why hide knowledge this way? Because knowledge, the Templars knew, was dangerous. They had seen how it could challenge kings and shake the foundations of faith. What if the prophecy they guarded, the one said to be found in the vault, revealed truths that threatened both church and crown? By encoding their wisdom in stone, they ensured that even if their order was destroyed, the message would endure. It would wait in silence until another age could read it. Not all who studied these buildings believed the Templars were architects of mystery. To many medieval chroniclers, they were simply efficient builders with skilled masons. Yet rumors persisted of secret meetings held inside circular churches, of rituals performed under moonlight, of initiates tracing symbols on the floor before dawn prayers. The round nave, they said, was not just a design, it was a symbol of eternity, of the union between heaven and earth. Within those circles, the Templars believed they stood in the very image of creation. One story tells of a small chapel in the mountains of Portugal, where a hidden inscription was discovered centuries later. It read, Lux Domini in Petra Latet, the light of the Lord hides in the stone. To most, it was a poetic phrase. To those who knew the Templar legend, it was a clue, perhaps even a confession. The light was not divine grace, but the secret illumination that had guided them since Jerusalem. As the order's wealth grew, so too did their influence. Kings borrowed from them, merchants trusted their banks, and pilgrims found safety under their protection. Yet the more powerful they became, the more suspicion grew around their hidden practices. The Church, always uneasy with mystery outside its control, began to whisper of heresy. What were the Knights truly worshipping? Why did their chapels bear symbols that predated Christianity? There were tales, quiet, dangerous tales, that the Templars had fused the wisdom of East and West, combining Christian mysticism with Sufi philosophy, Jewish Kabbalah, and the mathematics of the ancients. To some, this was blasphemy, to others, enlightenment. The Templars, for their part, remained silent. They believed their mission transcended dogma. Their faith, as one chronicler would later write, was not in the cross upon the altar, but in the light that made the cross visible. In their fortresses, they stored treasures not just of gold, but of knowledge. Manuscripts in Arabic, Greek, and Hebrew lined their libraries. Maps of the stars, treatises on alchemy, and theological texts banned by Rome. The brotherhood that had once sworn poverty had now become the keepers of a hidden tradition, one that stretched back through time like a vein of light buried beneath history. Yet, for all their secrecy, the Templars could not hide the growing unease that followed them. Travelers spoke of strange carvings of serpents and suns in their chapels. Peasants told of hooded knights seen walking under the stars, murmuring in languages no one understood. Even the clergy began to fear that beneath their vows of chastity and obedience lay something older, a forgotten faith reborn under a new name. Still, their architecture endured. Each stone remained exactly where it was placed, silent, watchful. The world changed around them. Wars began and ended. Kings rose and fell. But the Templar geometry never faltered. It was as though their buildings themselves were alive, humming faintly with the knowledge they carried. And so the question lingered. If the Templars encoded the secret of the vault within their architecture, what happens when someone finally deciphers it? What truth lies waiting in the walls of their temples, beneath the carvings, inside the angles of their design? That question, whispered across centuries, would one day draw the attention of men far removed from Jerusalem, men who would not seek salvation, but power. For some secrets, once hidden in stone, do not remain silent forever. By the middle of the 13th century, the Knights Templar had become more than a religious order. They were an empire within empires. Kings owed them gold, the Pope owed them protection, and the people owed them fear. Their red cross fluttered on ships, fortresses, and coined seals from the Holy Land to England. Yet, beneath their vows of humility, a new kind of tension had begun to coil, the kind that forms when faith meets unchecked power. What had started as a brotherhood of 9 poor knights was now a global organization. They owned farms, vineyards, ports, and entire towns. Their military might rivaled that of any kingdom, and their wealth, stored in vast treasuries guarded by silent knights, was unmatched. So powerful had they become that kings used their system of letters and deposits as a primitive form of banking. A noble could leave gold in Paris and withdraw it in Acre, his wealth protected not by the word of a king, but by the seal of the Templar order. It was a genius born from necessity, yet it carried an unintended consequence. It made the Templars indispensable. Monarchs who borrowed from them became debtors. Those who opposed them risked ruin. Their financial network spanned continents, invisible yet absolute. And still, the Templars insisted they served only God. But there were whispers, dark, insistent whispers, that the order's loyalty was not to Rome, nor to any earthly throne. Some claimed that within the highest ranks, a secret council guided their destiny, bound not by the cross, but by the prophecy discovered beneath the temple. This inner circle, it was said, interpreted the ancient words not as a warning, but as a mandate. The world must be reshaped, not ruled by popes or kings, but illuminated by knowledge. To them, the Templars were the chosen stewards of that enlightenment, guardians of the truth that lay buried beneath centuries of faith. This idea, that divine authority could exist outside the church, was heresy of the highest order. But the knights never said it aloud. Instead, they built alliances. They lent money to monarchs, funded crusades, and advised princes. They trained armies and built ships, all while maintaining an air of pious discipline. Yet beneath their cloaks, many wore small medallions engraved with symbols that the church did not recognize. The 8-pointed star, the serpent eating its own tail, the triangle within a circle. To the Templars, these were signs of the eternal cycle, the balance of life and knowledge. To others, they were marks of the occult. One king in particular began to take notice. Philip IV of France, called Philip the Fair. Outwardly devout, but inwardly ruthless, he had emptied his treasury through endless wars. And his greatest creditor was the Templar order. Their fortress in Paris stood like a kingdom within his capital, its coffers filled with gold that he could not touch. Philip began to resent them, not just for their wealth, but for their independence. They answered not to him, but to the Pope. Worse still, rumors reached his court that the Templars possessed a secret so powerful it could unmake both church and crown. Philip's spies reported strange rituals held within the Templar commandery at dawn. Initiates made to kneel before a skull, to renounce worldly kings, to pledge loyalty to the light of the temple. Whether these reports were truth or invention hardly mattered. To Philip, they were justification. He began to see the Templars not as knights of God, but as rivals to his throne, an invisible empire hiding behind the veil of sanctity. Meanwhile, within the order, division grew. Some knights still clung to the purity of their original mission: protect the pilgrims, defend the Holy Land. Others, particularly among the higher ranks, pursued deeper studies. They translated ancient manuscripts, debated the nature of creation, and sought the lost wisdom of the East. The prophecy found beneath Jerusalem was studied in secret, copied by hand, and guarded in sealed chests. One passage, often cited among initiates, read, "When the light is bound by crowns, it shall return to the shadows until the dawn of reason." To those who believed, this was a warning that the church's dominance would one day give way to a new age. But to their enemies, it was proof of rebellion. The church, uneasy with the Templars' growing autonomy, began to watch them more closely. The Pope himself, though grateful for their service, feared the power they wielded. And when rumors reached Rome that the order possessed forbidden texts, teachings that claimed divine truth could be found in man's own reason, the seeds of suspicion were planted. Still, the Templars endured. Their influence remained unbroken, their discipline unshaken. But as the Crusades faltered and Jerusalem was lost once more, a sense of destiny began to haunt them. Had they failed their divine mission? Or had they completed the first part of it, retrieving the knowledge buried beneath the holy city, and now awaited the second, the revelation to come? Some chroniclers wrote that the grand masters of the late order often gathered in secret councils, not to plan wars, but to interpret celestial alignments. They spoke of the prophecy's final verse, a time when the sons of light would be betrayed by the world they had sought to enlighten. Whether these councils were real or imagined, one truth cannot be denied. The Templars had risen too high. By the dawn of the 14th century, they were no longer seen as humble warriors of Christ, but as untouchable lords cloaked in mystery. Their very secrecy became their curse. Every unanswered question about their rights, every whisper of hidden treasures, every symbol carved into their chapels, all became fuel for fear. Philip IV, deep in debt and desperate for control, began to weave his plan. He would destroy the Templars, seize their wealth, and erase their influence. But he knew brute force was not enough. To topple the most revered order in Christendom, he needed something greater, a crime so damning that no one could defend them. And so began the Whisper Campaign, tales of idol worship, of heresy, of secret oaths sworn to demons and false gods. The Church, exhausted by scandal and fearful of losing authority, hesitated. But Philip's pressure grew relentless. It would all come to a head on one fateful night, a night that would end centuries of secrecy, power, and faith, and would begin the legend that still haunts the world today. For the prophecy of the temple had warned them, when the shadow grows longer than the crown, the fire shall come. That night, the shadow finally fell. Paris, October 13th, 1307. Dawn had not yet broken when the city stirred to the sound of iron boots on cobblestone. From every quarter, soldiers bearing the insignia of the French crown marched under torchlight, their orders sealed and absolute. The night air trembled with the hiss of rain and whispered prayers. Behind shuttered windows, the citizens of Paris watched as an army of shadows moved through the mist, converging upon a single destination, the temple. Inside its stone walls, the knights of the Order of the Temple awoke to pounding on the gates. They were not unaccustomed to danger. They had faced Saracen blades, sieges, and storms. But this was different. There was no battle cry, no herald of war. Only a single command echoed through the courtyard. In the name of the king. By royal decree of Philip IV, every Templar in France was to be arrested on charges of heresy, idolatry, and treason against the Church. The dawn that rose over Paris that morning revealed a world turned upside down. The once revered warriors of God were dragged from their beds in chains, their banners torn down, their treasures seized. Those who resisted were cut down where they stood. By nightfall, over 1,000 knights, men who had once held the trust of popes and princes, languished in the dungeons of their own kingdom. The accusations were monstrous. The Templars, the king's officials claimed, had renounced Christ, spat upon the cross, and worshipped a mysterious idol known only as Baphomet. They had engaged in secret rituals, exchanged forbidden kisses, and invoked dark powers in their initiation ceremonies. It was a story carefully crafted to terrify and to justify the unthinkable. The Church, initially hesitant, was cornered. Under Philip's pressure and the promise of purging corruption, Pope Clement V sanctioned an inquiry. The stage was set for one of history's most infamous betrayals. But what truly happened that night? Was it mere politics, a king's desperate bid to erase his debts and claim the Templar treasury? Or was there something deeper, something that terrified even the church itself? Some chroniclers speak of a sudden, coordinated strike across Europe. Hundreds of arrests made simultaneously, as if every secret door, every hidden archive had been mapped in advance. How could Philip have known where to strike so precisely, unless someone inside the order had betrayed them? Indeed, whispers of betrayal ripple through the centuries. Some claim that a high-ranking Templar, fearful of the growing heresy accusations, had turned informant. Others believe that agents within the French Inquisition had intercepted a secret letter from the Grand Master himself, a correspondence referencing the prophecy beneath the temple and the Age of Light. If such a letter existed, it would have been enough to brand the entire order as blasphemous. In the following days, interrogations began. The dungeons beneath Paris echoed with cries and the clatter of chains. Torture was the weapon of truth, and under its agony, men confessed to anything their captors desired. Some admitted to worshiping the skull idol. Others described visions of light, of rituals performed to preserve the knowledge of Solomon. But these confessions, drawn from fire and iron, tell us little of truth, only of pain. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was among the last to be captured. Proud, solemn, and aging, he had served the order for over 40 years. When brought before the inquisitors, he refused to confess, demanding to face his accusers in the light of day. For days he was kept in darkness, questioned endlessly, his words recorded and twisted. Finally, under unbearable strain, even he relented, giving a brief, cryptic admission that the brethren held certain truths not meant for kings. It was enough. The church declared the order heretical. The treasure of the Templars, however, vanished. When Philip's men searched the vaults of the Paris temple, they found them empty. No gold, no relics, no records. It was as if the knights had foreseen their downfall. Witnesses later spoke of carts leaving the temple in the dead of night, days before the arrests, guarded by a handful of knights who disappeared into the countryside. Some said the treasure was taken to the coast, loaded onto ships bound for Scotland or Cyprus. Others believed it was not gold they carried, but the relics from beneath Jerusalem, the scroll, the crystal tablet, and the prophecy itself. As the trials dragged on, Europe watched in horror and disbelief. How could the holiest warriors of Christendom become its greatest villains overnight? The Church, cornered by its own fear, allowed the spectacle to continue. The Inquisition demanded full repentance, but the Templars stood defiant. "We served God," one knight shouted before the court, "and if that is heresy, then heresy is holy." His words were silenced by fire. Outside the prison walls, rumors began to spread that the curse of the Templars had been unleashed. Storms battered France, crops failed, and strange lights were seen in the skies. To the faithful, it was punishment for the king's betrayal. To others, it was coincidence. But among the surviving knights, a different belief took hold, that the prophecy had begun to fulfill itself. The shadow longer than the crown had fallen, and the light was retreating into darkness once again. In March of 1314, 7 years after that night of arrests, Jacques de Molay was led to the stake on the Isle de la site. The setting sun cast long red light across the Seine as the Grand Master stood before his executioners. Bound and weary, he raised his head and spoke clearly for all to hear. "God knows who is wrong and has sinned," he said. Soon a great misfortune will come to those who have condemned us unjustly." Then the flames rose around him. According to witnesses, as the fire consumed him, de Molay's voice carried across the square, "Pope Clement and King Philip, I summon you to God's judgment within the year." And so it was. Within 12 months, both the Pope and the King were dead, one of illness, the other in a hunting accident. The prophecy, it seemed, had claimed its vengeance. But the fire that night did not destroy the Templars' legacy. If anything, it scattered it. Across Europe, surviving knights fled into hiding, some to Spain and Portugal, where they formed new orders under different names, others to Scotland, where legend says they aided in the birth of a secret brotherhood dedicated to preserving the light of the temple. The Templars had fallen in blood and fire, yet their secret lived on. The prophecy they guarded had not been erased. It had merely gone to ground, buried once more beneath the surface of history, waiting for another age to unearth it. And beneath the ashes of that night, a question still smoldered. What truth had burned with them? And who, in the centuries to come, would dare to reignite it? When the smoke cleared from Paris and the ashes of Jacques de Molay cooled on the wind, Europe believed the story was over. The Knights Templar were finished, their leaders executed, their lands confiscated, their name cursed. Philip IV declared victory, and the Pope officially dissolved the order in 1312. The banners of the Red Cross were torn down, their chapels abandoned or absorbed by rival orders. It should have been the end of a brotherhood that once spanned continents. But it wasn't. Across the mountains and coastlines of Europe, a quiet exodus began. Surviving Templars, stripped of title and home, vanished into the wild. Some found refuge among sympathetic nobles. Others took to the sea, disguising themselves as merchants or sailors. The Pope's decree could reach only so far, beyond the Alps, beyond the Pyrenees, beyond the power of kings. There, in the hidden valleys and remote ports, the order lived on in fragments. In Portugal, King Denis refused to persecute the Templars. He had benefited from their loyalty, their skill, and their wealth. When Rome demanded their arrest, he complied only in name. Instead, he formed a new order, the Order of Christ, and quietly transferred the Templar properties, treasures, and even knights into this new brotherhood. It was the same order, reborn under a different name. Their cross changed shape, but their mission remained the same: to guard the secret that had once lain beneath Jerusalem. It was under this banner that Portugal would one day launch the Age of Discovery. The ships of Prince Henry the Navigator bore the red cross of the Order of Christ, the very symbol that had once flown over Templar fortresses in the Holy Land. Some historians suggest that this was no coincidence. The Templars had long studied navigation, geometry, and the movement of the stars. What if their voyages to the ends of the earth were not merely about trade or conquest, but about following a map written in the heavens, one they had uncovered centuries before? In Spain, the story was similar. Many knights were absorbed into the Order of Montesa, their vows resworn under a different patron saint. In Germany and Eastern Europe, smaller groups joined local military orders or disappeared into monastic life. But in Scotland, their legend took a different turn. There, under the rule of King Robert the Bruce, himself excommunicated by the Church, the outlawed knights found sanctuary. Scottish chronicles tell of strange warriors appearing at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, the same year Jacques de Molay was burned. These horsemen, armored in white and bearing the Red Cross, charged alongside Bruce's forces and vanished as suddenly as they appeared. The victory that day secured Scotland's independence. In the decades that followed, Templar symbols began to appear in Scottish architecture and ritual. most notably within the stonemason guilds that would later evolve into Freemasonry. The Masonic lodges that emerged centuries later preserved certain geometric symbols, oaths of secrecy, and rites of initiation that bear an uncanny resemblance to those of the Templar order. Coincidence, perhaps, or the quiet survival of a lineage determined to outlast kings and inquisitors alike. Some scholars dismiss this as myth. Others believe it was the Templars' greatest triumph, transforming from a military brotherhood into a philosophical one, shifting their weapons from swords to symbols. But what of the treasure, the fabled hoard that vanished before Philip's soldiers could seize it? Accounts differ wildly. One rumor claims that a fleet of Templar ships slipped out of the port of La Rochelle on the eve of the arrests, their holds filled with chests and relics. Another insists that the treasure was buried in the hills of Rennes-le-Château, guarded by descendants sworn to silence. A few even whisper that it was never gold at all, but the knowledge from beneath the temple, copied on a parchment, etched into stone, hidden within the architecture of Europe itself. Whatever the truth, the disappearance of the treasure only deepened the mystery. The Church had destroyed the order's body, but not its spirit. Legends grew around the idea that the Templars had foreseen their downfall and prepared for it, scattering their archives, relics, and coded knowledge across multiple lands. Some say they even left clues in plain sight, disguised in the carvings of cathedrals and the layout of cities. In the centuries that followed, these whispers refused to die. In the 15th century, Portuguese explorers claimed to find Templar symbols carved into stones on distant shores, crosses that predated their arrival. In the New World, the same symbols appeared again, twin circles, triangles, and compass stars identical to those in Templar chapels. Could it be that the Knights, or their successors, had sailed beyond the known world, carrying their sacred mission across the sea? Meanwhile, in Europe, scholars and mystics began to revive ancient philosophies, Hermeticism, alchemy, and Kabbalah, ideas once whispered among the Templar elite. The same symbols that adorned their chapels now appeared in secret manuscripts and illuminated codices. It was as if their knowledge had seeped into the roots of the Renaissance itself. Artists and architects of the 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci among them, would later be accused of preserving Templar secrets through geometry and light. By then, the Templars had become myth. To the Church, they were heretics. To the people, they were ghosts. To the scholars of the New Age, they were pioneers of hidden wisdom, men who bridged faith and reason, the sword and the compass. But there was one truth that no one could deny. Their disappearance had not erased them. It had immortalized them. The prophecy they carried had not been lost in the flames. It had scattered like embers across the world, waiting for a new fire to kindle it. And so the question endured, whispered in taverns, monasteries, and royal courts alike. Where did the Templars go? Some said they fled to the mountains, guarding their secret until the age of light would dawn. Others claimed they walked among men, unrecognized, guiding humanity toward a destiny foretold beneath the Temple Mount. Whatever the answer, the Brotherhood had achieved what no army ever could. They had vanished not into death, but into legend. Their name erased, their symbol forbidden, yet their influence everywhere, in maps, in art, in stone, in silence. And somewhere, far from the reach of kings, perhaps in a hidden chapel lit by flickering candles, the last of the true Templars knelt before an altar carved with an ancient inscription, Lux ex tenebris, light from darkness. Their voices rose in quiet unison, not a prayer for salvation, but a vow. The vow that the secret they carried from beneath Jerusalem would never die. Centuries passed, and Europe forgot the faces of the men who once rode beneath the Crimson Cross. Their fortresses became ruins, their records lost or deliberately erased. Yet their name endured in whispers, Templar. It lingered like a ghost, haunting the imaginations of scholars, priests, and dreamers. The Church had tried to destroy their memory, but instead had made it immortal. What vanished in history survived in legend, and from legend, something far more enduring began to grow, an idea. That idea, the fusion of faith, reason, and secret knowledge, became the foundation of what many would later call the hidden legacy of the Templars. It was not an empire of stone or sword, but of symbols, geometry, and coded wisdom. Traces of it appeared in the blueprints of cathedrals, in the music of the Gregorian chant, and in the architecture of sacred spaces where light and mathematics danced in harmony. To those who could see, every arch and column spoke in the language of proportion, a divine geometry that the Knights had studied in Jerusalem. When the Renaissance dawned, its greatest thinkers began to rediscover the mysteries the Templars had guarded. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, architects like Brunelleschi, and mathematicians like Pacioli spoke of the divine proportion, the golden ratio, which governed beauty, harmony, and order. These men lived centuries after the fall of the Templars, yet the ideas they pursued echoed the same ancient truths that the Knights had once uncovered in the Holy Land. Some historians suggest that this was no coincidence, that secret manuscripts and coded texts, preserved by the descendants of Templar sympathizers, circulated quietly among Europe's intellectual elite. The great cathedrals of Europe, Notre Dame, Chartres, and Rosslyn, became silent witnesses to this hidden inheritance. Their stone carvings depicted symbols that did not belong to Christian canon alone: pentagrams, compasses, twin pillars, and strange, interlocking knots. These designs were not random. They were messages written in the language of form, mathematical prayers meant to reveal the unity between God and creation. Many modern scholars believe the Templars helped shape this sacred architecture, combining the mystical geometry of the East with the spiritual devotion of the West. Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, built in the 15th century by the Sinclair family, is perhaps the most striking example. Every surface of its walls is covered in intricate carvings, angels, plants, musical cubes, and symbols whose meaning remains debated to this day. The Sinclairs were believed to have sheltered Templars after their persecution, and Rosslyn's design seems to conceal layers of hidden knowledge. Some researchers claim it encodes musical frequencies in stone. Others argue that its layout mirrors the Temple of Solomon itself, the same holy structure the Templars once swore to protect. It is within this sacred geometry and architectural perfection that many believe the Templars preserved their secret legacy. When they could no longer ride openly under their banner, they became builders, philosophers, and scientists, embedding their faith in stone, number, and design. Their new battlefield was the human mind, their new weapon, knowledge. As Europe evolved, the spirit of the Templars found new vessels. The Masonic orders that flourished in the 17th and 18th centuries carried forward rituals that bore striking resemblance to those of the old Knights. Oaths of secrecy, initiations through symbolic death and rebirth, and the pursuit of enlightenment through moral and intellectual discipline. The Masonic compass and square, symbols of geometry and divine creation, echo the Templars' devotion to sacred proportion. Even the Masonic ideal of universal brotherhood mirrors the Templars' vision of unity among men under divine law. Whether Freemasonry directly descended from the Templars or simply inherited their spirit remains a subject of fierce debate. Yet the similarities are undeniable. In both, we find the same quest to unite science and spirituality, reason and revelation. And perhaps that is the true, hidden legacy, not a buried treasure or lost relic, but an enduring way of seeing the world. Meanwhile, beyond Europe, another mystery unfolds. In the New World, strange Templar-like symbols were discovered carved into stones and caves long before European colonists arrived. The double cross, the compass rose, and the red star appeared in places where they had no reason to be. Some believe these were marks left by explorers guided by Templar descendants, sailors of the Order of Christ who ventured across the Atlantic long before Columbus. If this is true, then the legacy of the Knights was not only intellectual but global. Their dream of a new Jerusalem, a purified world, may have driven them to seek lands beyond the map. The Enlightenment of the 18th century, with its explosion of scientific discovery and humanist philosophy, bore the same essence that had once burned in the hearts of the Templars, a belief that truth could be sought not through blind faith or obedience, but through understanding. The Church, which had condemned them as heretics, now found itself confronted by a world transformed by their descendants in spirit. The age of secret brotherhoods, alchemists, and philosophers was in many ways the rebirth of Templar ideals, the marriage of light and knowledge. In the centuries that followed, the name of the Templars was invoked again and again by revolutionaries, mystics, and explorers alike. Napoleon sought to revive their image when he crowned himself emperor. Secret societies used their symbols to hint at ancient authority, and authors like Sir Walter Scott and later Dan Brown transformed their story into mythic legend. Yet beneath the fiction lies a consistent truth, that the Templars' influence never truly ended. It changed form, adapted, and survived, hidden in art, architecture, philosophy, and the human desire to seek meaning beyond the visible. Their hidden legacy may not lie in gold or relics, but in the very foundations of Western thought. The quest for enlightenment, the belief in a universal order, the reverence for geometry, and the pursuit of inner transformation. These were the Templars' true gifts to the world. As the centuries rolled on, kings rose and fell, empires flourished and crumbled, but the same symbols reappeared in unexpected places, in the Great Seal of the United States, in cathedral blueprints, in the design of observatories and universities. The flame lit by the warrior monks of the 12th century continued to burn, invisible but unextinguished. And perhaps that was always their plan, to transcend the limits of time and empire, to pass on their truth not as a religion, but as a pattern, a code hidden in the very architecture of civilization. In the end, their greatest victory was not survival, but transformation. The Templars no longer needed a name or a fortress. Their true fortress was the human mind, and as long as men sought knowledge, light, and freedom from ignorance, the order would never truly die. Beneath the sunlit stones of Jerusalem lies a labyrinth of chambers, tunnels, and forgotten vaults, the silent bones of ancient civilizations stacked upon one another. For centuries, pilgrims have walked these streets unaware that beneath their feet lies one of the deepest mysteries of the medieval world. The Temple Mount, sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, was once the beating heart of Solomon's temple, and it was here, according to legend, that the Knights Templar made their most astonishing discovery. When the First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099, the Holy City was drenched in both glory and blood. Amidst the ruins of conquest, the Templars, then a small band of poor knights sworn to protect pilgrims, chose a curious residence, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, built atop the remains of Solomon's temple. It was a strange decision for a military order, for the mosque was not defensible, nor was it rich. Yet the Knights insisted this was their chosen home. To many, it seemed like an act of piety. To others, it was the first step in a far deeper mission, one that had nothing to do with guarding pilgrims and everything to do with uncovering something buried beneath the mount itself. Contemporary accounts speak of the Knights spending long periods in seclusion, avoiding public life, and even conducting strange excavations. Chroniclers noted that their leader, Hugues de Payens, refused to disclose what the order was truly doing beneath the temple. The question that has haunted historians ever since is simple. What were they looking for? Archaeological evidence supports the idea that the Templars dug extensively beneath the Temple Mount. In the 19th century, British explorers such as Charles Warren discovered narrow tunnels leading into the heart of the mount. Some blocked, others deliberately collapsed. Fragments of ancient pillars, carved inscriptions, and traces of sealed chambers hinted that the Templars might have found something of immense importance, something powerful enough to change the course of history. Theories about what they unearthed are as varied as they are extraordinary. Some say they found the long-lost treasures of Solomon, golden artifacts, sacred vessels, and perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant itself. Others claim they discovered scrolls or tablets inscribed with pre-Christian wisdom, knowledge inherited from Egypt or Babylon, secrets of geometry, astronomy, and divine creation. Still others whisper that the Knights uncovered a truth so dangerous that it threatened the very foundations of the Church, a truth about Christ himself. One of the most persistent legends connects the Templars to the Holy Grail, not as a cup, but as a symbol of divine knowledge. According to this theory, the Grail was never a physical object, but a sacred understanding, a revelation about humanity's connection to the divine. The Templars, by delving into the ruins of Solomon's temple, are said to have rediscovered this lost wisdom, a bridge between the spiritual and the scientific, between heaven and earth. But what if their excavation was not just physical, but symbolic? The Temple Mount itself represents layers of human history, faith built upon faith, civilization upon civilization. By digging beneath it, the Templars were metaphorically peeling away the strata of religion and myth in search of the original truth, the pure essence of divine order that existed before dogma divided men. Whether they succeeded or not, their secrecy suggests they found something that could not be shared openly. Historical fragments support this notion of forbidden discovery. Soon after their years in Jerusalem, the Templars transformed from obscure monks into one of the most powerful organizations in Christendom. Within a few decades, they possessed immense wealth, vast lands, and unprecedented political influence. Their sudden rise has long puzzled historians. How could a handful of poor knights achieve such power so quickly? It is as if they returned from the Holy Land with not only relics and favor, but knowledge that kings and popes coveted. In some versions of the legend, the Templars were said to have found ancient scrolls describing the secrets of Solomon's wisdom, instructions for harnessing the energies of the natural world, the hidden correspondences between matter and spirit. These writings, if they existed, may have laid the foundation for later esoteric traditions, alchemy, Hermeticism, and the mystic sciences of the Renaissance. Others claim they found genealogical records that challenged the Church's teachings, hinting at a bloodline descending from Christ himself, the ultimate heresy. Whatever the truth, the Templars guarded it with unbreakable silence. Their order's inner hierarchy was divided into degrees of secrecy, and only the highest-ranking members were ever initiated into its ultimate mysteries. Initiation ceremonies were said to involve strange rituals, the kissing of certain sacred objects, oaths of silence, and symbols that predated Christianity. To outsiders, it looked like heresy. To insiders, it was sacred preservation. As years passed, rumors of what they had found spread through Europe. The church grew wary. Kings grew jealous. Whispers turned into accusations. Blasphemy, idolatry, worship of strange idols like the Baphomet. Many historians now believe these accusations were political fabrications, but others suspect that they stem from a garbled truth, that the Templars did possess hidden knowledge, but knowledge too ancient and complex for the medieval mind to comprehend. Modern archaeological surveys of the Temple Mount have revealed that large sections remain unexplored, sealed off due to religious and political sensitivities. Yet the stories persist. Beneath the surface, according to some fringe researchers, lie vaults containing remnants of the Templars' excavation, tunnels filled in haste, chambers still untouched since the 12th century. If one could ever open them, perhaps the greatest mystery of the Middle Ages would finally be answered. But perhaps the true discovery was never meant to be physical at all. The Templars may have realized that the temple, the house of God, was not a structure of stone, but a reflection of the human soul. To uncover the divine, one must dig not into the earth, but into oneself. This deeper, spiritual interpretation explains why the Templars' philosophy blended discipline with mysticism, combat with contemplation. Still, one question remains, echoing through time like a whisper beneath the stones. What exactly did the Templars find beneath Jerusalem? A relic? A revelation? Or something so profound that even centuries of secrecy could not contain its echo? Whatever it was, it changed them, and through them, it changed the world. And as the centuries unfolded, that secret buried beneath the Temple Mount would ignite one of the greatest transformations in Western history, the rise of a hidden knowledge that would survive in shadow long after the order itself was destroyed. When the Templars returned from the Holy Land, they did not come back as the same humble knights who had once begged for alms. Their demeanor had changed, quieter, more reserved, as though they carried a secret too heavy to be spoken aloud. They built fortresses in silence, established commanderies across Europe, and gathered immense resources, all while keeping their true mission hidden from prying eyes. It was during this period that the first whispers began, tales of mysterious scrolls, of writings unearthed beneath the Temple Mount, known later in rumor and legend as the Scrolls of Light. No historian has ever proven their existence, yet the legends surrounding them are persistent and strikingly detailed. The Scrolls of Light were said to be made not of papyrus or parchment, but of an unknown, almost translucent material that shimmered under flame. According to the stories, the writing on them glowed faintly. Not ink, but something luminous, etched into the surface with precision that seemed beyond medieval craftsmanship. To those who could read them, they revealed truths about the universe, mathematics, and the nature of creation itself. The Templars, it is said, guarded these scrolls more fiercely than any treasure of gold or silver. Only the Grand Master and a few trusted initiates were permitted to study them, and even then, only after years of discipline and meditation. Their contents, some claimed, could drive a man mad if he approached them without spiritual preparation, for they revealed the divine order behind all existence, a pattern that bound the stars, the earth, and the soul in one eternal design. To understand why such a discovery would be so dangerous, one must recall the world of the 12th century. The Church's authority was absolute. To question its teachings was to question God himself. Yet these supposed scrolls contained knowledge that blurred the line between science and faith. They spoke, according to later accounts, of the unity of all creation, that God's presence was not confined to the church or the sacraments, but existed within the very geometry of nature. The Templars, perhaps, realized that the divine was not separate from the material, but expressed through it. If the scrolls of light truly existed, they could explain the Templars' extraordinary rise in power. Their grasp of mathematics, architecture, and finance was far beyond their contemporaries. They designed structures aligned with astronomical precision, built vaults that have withstood centuries, and managed one of the first international banking systems in history. To some, this was genius, to others, sorcery. Their ability to move resources across continents, predict weather patterns, and even engineer irrigation and fortification systems suggested that they possessed knowledge unavailable to any other medieval order. But what if this knowledge was not learned, but rediscovered? What if, buried beneath Jerusalem, they had found fragments of a civilization that understood the laws of nature in ways that later ages would only begin to grasp? The Temple of Solomon, after all, was said to have been built with wisdom from the stars. Perhaps those who constructed it, whether ancient Israelites, Egyptians, or another forgotten people, encoded in its foundations a kind of sacred physics, a map of creation itself. Centuries later, hints of this hidden science appeared again in the works of Hermetic scholars and Renaissance magi. The language of light, the symbolism of the sun and the cube, the geometry of divine proportion, all mirrored the alleged teachings of the scrolls of light. They were said to describe how light was not merely a physical phenomenon, but a manifestation of divine intelligence, that every beam carried within it the memory of creation, the original word spoken at the beginning of time. To know this was to glimpse the mechanism of God. The Templars, realizing the explosive implications of such revelations, hid the scrolls away. Some accounts claim they were transported to France, concealed beneath the fortress at Geysers. Others insist they were divided. One set kept in Scotland, another in Portugal, and a final set lost forever during the fall of Acre. Legends tell of ships sailing into the mist, carrying chests sealed in iron, their contents never to be seen again. Even after their persecution in 1307, rumors persisted that the knowledge of the scrolls survived. During the interrogations of captured knights, several confessed, under torture, to possessing sacred writings from the East. Though most of these confessions were extracted by force, and therefore unreliable, the repetition of the same idea across different regions suggests a common truth, that the Templars believed they were custodians of a divine science. In the centuries that followed, scattered references to luminous scrolls appeared in unexpected places, in alchemical treatises, in Kabbalistic writings, even in Islamic mysticism. Each spoke of a revelation of light-made word, a wisdom lost after the fall of the First Temple. It was as though fragments of the same mystery had diffused into every faith, each preserving a sliver of what had once been whole. What makes the legend of the Scrolls of Light so haunting is not whether they were real, but what they represented. They symbolized the human yearning to know, to pierce the veil between the material and the divine. The Templars, by seeking such knowledge, walked a path both illuminated and perilous. For in their pursuit of light, they threatened those who ruled through darkness. If the Church had learned that the Templars possessed writings suggesting that divine truth was accessible outside of its authority, it would have meant heresy of the highest order. No wonder, then, that within a century of their rise, the Templars were branded as idolaters and destroyed. Yet even as the flames consumed their bodies, their mystery refused to die. The scrolls of light may never be found, but their legacy endures in the very things that make civilization possible. In architecture, science, and the belief that knowledge is sacred. Perhaps that was the Templars' true revelation, that enlightenment is not a gift bestowed from above, but a flame waiting to be uncovered within the human soul. And so, the question remains, if the Templars did carry from beneath Jerusalem a truth so radiant it had to be hidden, where is it now? Buried in a vault beneath Rosslyn Chapel? Locked away in the Vatican's secret archives? Or, as some believe, scattered in code across the symbols of cathedrals and monuments, waiting for those with eyes to see the light within the stone? Whatever the answer, the mystery of the scrolls of light continues to shimmer at the edge of history, a reminder that even the brightest truths must sometimes hide in darkness, waiting for an age ready to understand them. There are whispers, ancient, perilous whispers, that what the Templars discovered beneath the Temple Mount was not gold, not sacred geometry, not even the scrolls of light, but a revelation about blood itself. Not metaphorical blood, but lineage. A secret so radical it could shatter the Church's foundation. The claim that Jesus of Nazareth may have left descendants, a living bloodline. To protect, it was to guard the holiest treasure of all, and to reveal it would have meant the end of Christian authority as the medieval world knew it. The theory is as intoxicating as it is forbidden. It begins with the notion that Christ's mission was never meant to end in crucifixion, that his teachings were intended to pass through his followers, not just spiritually, but through family. Some Gnostic traditions, long suppressed by the Church, spoke of Jesus and Mary Magdalene as united partners, bound not only in faith but in love. The Templars, according to this legend, uncovered documents or relics beneath Solomon's temple that confirmed this, evidence of sacred lineage that had continued in secret through the centuries. If true, this would explain the extraordinary reverence the Templars held for Mary Magdalene, whom they often portrayed in their chapels as a figure of wisdom equal to Christ himself. Unlike the Church, which reduced her to a penitent sinner, the Templars seemed to venerate her as a vessel of divine knowledge, the feminine face of the sacred. This veneration appeared in their symbols, the rose and the cross entwined, the chalice and the sword, emblems that, in later centuries, would re-emerge in secret societies and alchemical orders as representations of unity between opposites, the merging of the divine masculine and feminine. But what does this have to do with blood? In the esoteric sense, blood is the carrier of life, the sacred current that connects body and soul. To believe in a bloodline of Christ is not simply to trace DNA. It is to claim continuity of divine essence through generations. The Templars, having found evidence of such a lineage, may have sworn to protect it at all costs. This would make their mission in the Holy Land not one of conquest, but of preservation, guardians of the living descendants of the divine. Historians are divided on this theory. Traditional scholarship dismisses it as myth, born from the romantic imagination of later centuries. Yet there are anomalies that defy easy explanation. The sudden rise of the Templars after returning from Jerusalem, their unshakable secrecy, and their refusal to answer to any king or pope, all suggest they believe their authority came from a higher, possibly hereditary, source. They were the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, but their Christ may not have been the same as Rome's. In southern France, in the region of Languedoc, another mystery deepens the connection. The Cathars, a Christian sect annihilated by the Church in the early 13th century, shared beliefs eerily similar to those attributed to the Templars. They spoke of a divine duality, a sacred feminine, and a spiritual bloodline hidden from the corruption of the world. When the Church declared a crusade against them, the Templars hesitated to participate fully. Some even aided Cathar refugees, offering them sanctuary in Templar fortresses. Was this mere compassion or recognition of a shared secret? It is in this same region, centuries later, that the story of Rennes-le-Château would unfold. The tale of a 19th century priest who supposedly discovered coded parchments revealing a bloodline descending from Jesus and Mary Magdalene, protected through the ages by secret orders. While the modern legend of Rennes-le-Château has been heavily sensationalized, many researchers believe it draws from much older traditions rooted in Templar lore. The parallels are too precise to ignore. The symbolism of the Grail, too, takes on a new meaning in this light. If the Grail was not a cup but a vessel of life, the womb, the bloodline, then the Templars' quest for the Holy Grail becomes a mission to preserve this sang real, the royal blood. Linguistically, sang real, royal blood, later evolved into sang Graal, Holy Grail, a linguistic shift that concealed a heresy in plain sight. The Templars' secrecy now makes chilling sense. To reveal such a truth would have been catastrophic. It would have meant that divine authority did not rest in the Church, nor even in Scripture, but in a human lineage, a family whose existence threatened to upend the entire religious order of medieval Europe. If the Templars held such knowledge, then their persecution in 1307 was not simply a matter of wealth and politics, but of silence, a ruthless effort to erase a truth that could not be controlled. Some researchers argue that after the fall of the order, fragments of this bloodline knowledge survived through hidden channels, through families connected to the Templars, through secret brotherhoods like the Priory of Chaon, and through symbols woven into art, architecture, and ritual. The rose windows of Gothic cathedrals, for instance, may have symbolized the womb, the source of divine creation, while the recurring motifs of the dove and the chalice represented the union of spirit and flesh. By the Renaissance, whispers of the bloodline's secret had transformed into allegory. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci painted cryptic images of balance and duality, the masculine and feminine in perfect harmony. His Last Supper became a puzzle in itself, with the figure beside Christ interpreted by some as Mary Magdalene, not the Apostle John. Whether intentional or not, the symbolism echoes the Templar mythos, that salvation was not found in death and sacrifice alone, but in the union of opposites, in life renewed through love and continuity. In modern times, the legend of the bloodline has been both ridiculed and revered. Some see it as blasphemy, others as revelation. But regardless of its factual basis, the idea persists because it speaks to something deeper than theology, the human yearning to connect the divine to our own humanity. The thought that the divine might live within us, pass through generations of ordinary flesh and blood, transforms faith from obedience into wonder. If the Templars truly believed they were the guardians of such a secret, it would explain everything: their silence, their defiance, their destruction. For no power on earth could allow a truth that made kings and popes irrelevant. And so, the bloodline's secret remains one of the most haunting possibilities in all of Templar lore, a thread that binds history, faith, and myth into one forbidden revelation. Whether hidden in a vault beneath Jerusalem, preserved in coded symbols across Europe, or simply carried in the whispers of legend, it endures, a secret too sacred to die. Perhaps the greatest irony is this: even if the bloodline never existed, the idea of it, that the divine lives on in humanity, may have been the true treasure the Templars sought to protect. For in believing that God's light flows through human veins, they gave birth to a truth that can never be buried, no matter how deeply the earth tries to hide it. It began quietly, almost invisibly, as all great betrayals do, not with swords drawn, but with whispers in candlelit halls. By the dawn of the 14th century, the Knights Templar had become one of the most powerful organizations in Europe. Their influence extended across kingdoms. Their fortresses dotted the landscape from Scotland to Jerusalem. They were bankers, diplomats, warriors, and mystics, loyal to no king, answering only to God and their Grand Master. Yet their very independence would become their undoing. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was a ruler as ambitious as he was desperate. His wars had drained the royal treasury, and his debts to the Templars ran deep. To Philip, the Templars were no longer holy soldiers. They were a threat, a rival power with enough wealth and loyalty to challenge his rule. He began to see them not as protectors of Christendom, but as dangerous relics of a bygone age. And in their secrecy, he found the perfect pretext for destruction. The church, too, had changed. The papacy had moved to Avignon, and Pope Clement V, though outwardly pious, was politically fragile. Bound by obligation to Philip, he became a puppet in the French king's hands. Together, they conspired to bring down the Templars, not for heresy, but for control. And so, under the guise of divine justice, one of the greatest betrayals in history was set in motion. The date was Friday, October 13th, 1307, a day that would echo through centuries as a symbol of misfortune. At dawn, royal agents swept across France, armed with sealed orders. In every commandery, the Templars were taken by surprise. Men who had once charged fearlessly into battle were dragged from their beds, bound, and accused of the unthinkable, worshipping idols, spitting on the cross, and consorting with demons. The charges were absurd, but they served their purpose. In an age where heresy was worse than treason, even the whisper of blasphemy could destroy a man or an entire order. The interrogations were brutal. In the dungeons of Paris, Templars were tortured until they confessed to crimes they had never committed. Some claimed they were forced to renounce Christ during initiation, others that they had kissed a mysterious idol known as Baphomet. These confessions, extracted under unimaginable pain, were paraded as proof of guilt. In truth, they revealed nothing but the cruelty of men seeking to erase a threat. Among the captives was the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. He was an old man by then, weary, proud, and unwavering in faith. For 7 years he endured imprisonment, watching his brothers die one by one, some burned, others broken by torture. Yet through it all, de Molay refused to betray the order's secrets. Whether they were of gold, relics, or something far deeper, he carried them to his death. In 1312, after years of pressure, Pope Clement formally dissolved the Order of the Temple. Its properties were seized, its members scattered, its legacy stained. But the king's vengeance was not yet complete. 2 years later, Jacques de Molay and the last of his commanders were led to the Isle de la site in Paris, where a wooden pyre awaited them. As the flames licked upward, de Molay called out, not in fear, but in defiance. Pope Clement, King Philip, within a year, I summon you both before God's judgment. The witnesses said his voice carried across the Seine like thunder. True to his words, both men were dead within a year, Clement of illness, Philip from a sudden stroke. For centuries, many would call it divine retribution, the curse of the Templars. But the story did not end with fire. When the ashes cooled, something curious happened. Not all the Templars were gone. Many had fled France before the arrests, warned by secret messengers or by instinct. Some found refuge in Scotland, where King Robert the Bruce, excommunicated by Rome, welcomed them as allies. It is said that at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, mysterious knights bearing the red cross rode into the fray, turning the tide in Scotland's favor. Whether legend or truth, it speaks to the enduring power of their name. In Portugal, too, the Templar spirit survived. There, King Denis reformed the surviving knights into a new order, the Order of Christ, allowing them to continue their mission under a different name. This order would later sponsor voyages of discovery, including those of Prince Henry the Navigator, spreading Templar knowledge to the far corners of the earth. And in Switzerland, a small, disciplined group of soldiers appeared soon after, masters of mountain warfare, fiercely independent, bound by an oath of brotherhood. Some scholars see in them the echo of the Templars, their methods, their discipline, their emblematic cross. The Swiss flag itself, a white cross on red, may carry faint memory of the Red Cross banners that once flew over Templar castles. Yet the most enduring mystery lies in what was never found. Despite the king's efforts, no great Templar treasure was ever recovered. The gold, relics, and documents that supposedly lay in their commanderies had vanished. Some say they were smuggled out of France under cover of darkness, loaded onto ships that sailed from La Rochelle, ships that were never seen again. Others believe the treasure was never gold at all, but knowledge, maps, texts, or sacred relics that could change the world if revealed. The fall of the Templars marked the end of an era, but not the end of their legend. In their downfall, they achieved what perhaps no order had before: immortality through mystery. Their name became a cipher, a vessel into which every age poured its own fears and hopes. To some, they were martyrs of faith; to others, the keepers of forbidden wisdom. And to those who still believe in the whispers of the Grail and the bloodline, their destruction was not a defeat but a concealment, a way to protect a secret too sacred for kings or popes to possess. In the centuries that followed, the world would see their symbols return in alchemy, in Freemasonry, in secret societies claiming descent from the temple. Whether these claims hold truth or not, one fact remains undeniable: the Templars never truly died. Their fall only scattered their fire, and from that fire rose 1,000 sparks, each one keeping alive the memory of those who once wore the Red Cross and vowed to protect something greater than themselves. Their story ends, as all great myths do, not in despair, but in transformation. The Templars fell, but their spirit endures, in the courage to seek truth, in the defiance of corruption, and in the unyielding belief that some mysteries are worth dying for. When the smoke of the pyres cleared and the cries of the condemned faded into silence, Europe believed the order of the temple was finished. Their castles were seized, their banners torn down, their sacred relics taken as spoils of war. But history, like truth, is rarely so final. Beneath the ashes of their public destruction, a quieter story began, one written not in ink and parchment, but in whispers, secret journeys, and unmarked graves. In the remote corners of Europe, far from the reach of King Philip's inquisitors, small groups of surviving Templars emerged. Some disguised themselves as monks, others as mercenaries or traders. They abandoned their armor and their symbols, but not their vows. In England, where the persecution was milder, many were quietly absorbed into other military orders or allowed to live out their days in obscurity. In the wilder lands, Scotland, Portugal, and the Pyrenean foothills, they found refuge and perhaps something more. In Scotland, the legend speaks of a secret alliance between the Templars and Robert the Bruce, the outlaw king. Excommunicated and hunted, Bruce needed soldiers who could fight with precision and faith, and the exiled Templars needed protection. Some accounts describe their arrival on the western shores of Scotland, bringing with them chests of gold and relics saved from France. When Bruce's forces faced the English at Bannockburn in 1314, witnesses spoke of mysterious knights in white mantles charging through the mist, turning the tide of battle in Scotland's favor. Whether this was truth or myth, it symbolized something larger, the rebirth of the Templar spirit in the shadows of exile. In Portugal, their survival was far more deliberate. King Denis, a ruler of remarkable cunning, refused to turn his Templars over to Rome. Instead, he created a new order, the Order of Christ, granting its members the same lands, rights, and privileges the Templars once held. Officially, it was a different brotherhood. Unofficially, it was the Templars reborn. The red cross of the Order of Christ bore the same proportions, the same shape, the same defiant symbolism. From their fortress at Tomar, they would continue the old mission, but now under the banner of the Portuguese crown. It was this order that, 2 centuries later, would fund the voyages of discovery, the great expeditions that opened new worlds. Prince Henry the Navigator himself was the Grand Master of the Order of Christ. The sails of his ships bore the same red cross once worn by the Templars. Thus, in a strange twist of fate, the order that had been crushed for its supposed ambition to control the world's secrets became the engine of an age that expanded the known world itself. Through exploration, they would achieve what even kings could not. They would reshape the boundaries of Earth. But while Portugal carried the visible legacy of the Templars, the invisible legacy, the hidden one, spread elsewhere. Across the Alps, in the valleys of Switzerland, a new kind of brotherhood arose. They were disciplined, fiercely loyal, and renowned for their mastery of arms and defense. Some historians believe that the first Swiss cantons, united in resistance against tyranny, were influenced by surviving Templars. The Swiss cross, a white cross on a red field, bears uncanny resemblance to the Templar banner. It may be coincidence, or perhaps the ideals of freedom, brotherhood, and sacred duty found a new home among the mountains. Meanwhile, in southern France and northern Spain, rumors persisted of hidden Templar enclaves, mountain fortresses where the persecuted knights guarded not treasure, but knowledge. The Pyrenees, long a refuge for heretics and mystics, became the backdrop for countless legends. Shepherds spoke of hooded figures moving through the mist, of secret rites conducted in ancient caves, of gold and relics buried beneath ruined chapels. Even the Cathar stronghold of Montségur, destroyed decades earlier, was said to conceal a treasure passed to the Templars before their own downfall, a relic that tied both heretical sects to the same forbidden secret. But what exactly were they protecting? If it were merely gold or relics, surely such treasures would have surfaced over time. Instead, what endured were stories, fragments of something deeper. Some claimed the Templars had preserved ancient texts found beneath the Temple Mount, writings that spoke of hidden lineages, lost wisdom, and truths too dangerous for the Church to accept. Others believed they had guarded relics tied to the very foundations of Christianity, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the bones of a sacred bloodline. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The Templars in exile never ceased to act as guardians. Whether of faith, knowledge, or destiny, they continued their mission in secrecy. Their presence can be traced not through monuments, but through symbols. The 8-pointed cross carved into forgotten stones, the alignment of old churches along geometric paths, the appearance of strange sigils in medieval manuscripts. All hints that their work did not die with their order. As centuries passed, these symbols were adopted by other groups. The Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and later, the esoteric societies of Europe all claimed descent from the Templars. Some saw themselves as inheritors of the same secret, a belief in the unity of divine truth hidden beneath the corruption of institutions. In Masonic lodges, rituals of initiation echoed Templar oaths. In their architecture, the geometry of Solomon's temple reappeared. Whether through conscious inheritance or mythic imagination, the Templar current flowed on, a silent river beneath the surface of European history. The exile, then, was not merely a flight for survival. It was a transformation, from a military order to a hidden network of guardians. They no longer fought wars with swords, but with ideas. They moved from the battlefield to the realm of secrecy, where knowledge was the weapon and memory was the fortress. Yet, even in exile, they never forgot Jerusalem. For in their heart, the holy city remained the axis of all things, the place where their story began and where, perhaps, it was destined to end. The treasures and texts they once unearthed beneath the Temple Mount had set their destiny in motion. Now, scattered and hunted, they protected those same relics with their lives, waiting for the day when the world would be ready to receive the truth they had carried from the East. History remembers them as ghosts of a fallen age, but in truth, they became something far more enduring. They were the keepers of continuity, the bridge between the sacred and the secret, between the past and a world yet to come. Their exile was not their end. It was their rebirth, in silence, in shadows, and in the hearts of those who believe that truth, once found, can never truly be destroyed. Even after the fires of persecution had died and the ashes of Jacques de Molay had cooled on the banks of the Seine, one mystery refused to fade: the Templar treasure. It haunted kings, scholars, and fortune-seekers alike. For all the wealth seized by Philip IV, none of it came close to what the order was rumored to possess. The ledgers of royal officials revealed little. The vaults yielded almost nothing. Where, then, had the fortune of the Knights Templar gone? The order had once been among the richest institutions in Europe. They had financed kings, managed estates, collected tithes, and guarded caravans of gold and relics through war-torn lands. Their network of commanderies stretched across Christendom, each one a node in a web of secrecy and logistics. From these centers, funds flowed in endless streams to the Holy Land, to Rome, to distant outposts few had ever seen. But when the arrest began, much of this wealth simply vanished. No treasure caravans were intercepted, no great vaults uncovered. It was as if centuries of accumulated power had evaporated overnight. Some say this disappearance was no accident. According to accounts whispered through the ages, the Templars knew the storm was coming. Months before the fateful dawn of October 13th, 1307, secret messengers rode between Paris and the coastal stronghold of La Rochelle. There, in the dead of night, ships were prepared, swift and sturdy vessels laden with chests sealed in wax and iron. When the king's men came to seize the port, they found only empty docks and silent waters. The ships had vanished into the Atlantic, never to be seen again. What do they carry? Gold, relics, documents, or was something far greater? Some chroniclers spoke of sacred relics taken from beneath the Temple Mount, the cup of Christ, the head of John the Baptist, or even fragments of the ark itself. Others believed the Templars had discovered something intangible but infinitely valuable: knowledge. Perhaps ancient scriptures hidden by early Christians, or secrets inherited from the builders of Solomon's temple. Whatever it was worth dying to protect. One of the most persistent theories claims that the fleet from La Rochelle sailed north to Scotland. There, beyond the reach of both Pope and King, the exiled Templars found refuge. It is said that they buried their treasure beneath Rosslyn Chapel, a strange, ornate church built 2 centuries later, laden with carvings of impossible detail. Its columns bear symbols of both Christianity and paganism. Its arches whisper of hidden geometry. On its walls are carvings of maize and aloe, plants unknown in Europe before Columbus's voyages, suggesting that the builders possessed knowledge far beyond their time. The connection between the Templars and Rosslyn is tenuous in records, but strong in legend. The chapel's founding family, the Sinclairs, were rumored descendants of Templar allies. And in its crypt, sealed since the 15th century, many believe lies the final resting place of the treasure, not of gold, but of revelation. The idea that something so profound could be hidden in plain sight, waiting beneath stone and silence, captures the imagination like few tales in history. Other theories lead the fleet further west, across the ocean itself. Long before Columbus, maps existed that depicted strange lands beyond the Atlantic. Some researchers suggest that the Templars, inheriting ancient seafaring knowledge from the Phoenicians or Moors, reached the shores of the New World. Carvings in Nova Scotia, symbols in old Scottish graves, and even structures resembling pre-Columbian fortifications have been tied to them. The story of Oak Island, a mysterious pit said to conceal booby-trapped tunnels and hidden relics, has often been linked to this legend. The Money Pit, discovered in the 18th century, has yielded fragments of parchment, strange stone inscriptions, and layers of timber, as if deliberately engineered to conceal something monumental. Could the Templar treasure lie buried beneath the soil of the New World? Or is the treasure itself a metaphor, a secret so vast it needed to be hidden across oceans, encoded in symbols and geometry? Back in Europe, other clues emerge in the strangest of places. Old Templar churches, when mapped, reveal a curious pattern, alignments that form geometric shapes across entire regions. Some scholars believe these alignments point to hidden caches or sanctuaries where relics were stored. Others see them as a spiritual map, connecting sacred sites in imitation of the heavenly order. Beneath the floor of many such chapels lie sealed chambers, some still unopened after 7 centuries. In Spain's Aragon and France's Languedoc, rumors persist of tunnels leading from Templar ruins into the mountains. During the Inquisition, locals spoke of monks who vanished through hidden doors when soldiers approached, carrying chests bound in red wax. Centuries later, explorers would uncover sealed crypts filled not with gold, but with manuscripts, some in Latin, others in strange, unknown scripts. Were these remnants of the treasure, or simply the debris of time? And yet, perhaps the greatest clue lies not in what was taken, but in what was left behind. When Jacques de Molay went to the stake, he carried nothing, no relic, no scroll. But witnesses reported that as the flames rose, he lifted his hands skyward and uttered a final vow, that the truth of the temple would rise again when the world is ready. Many took this as a prophecy, a declaration that the treasure of the Templars was not of the earth, but of spirit and knowledge, destined to resurface when humanity had evolved beyond the corruption of kings and priests. Through centuries, secret societies claimed to hold fragments of this inheritance. The Freemasons traced their lineage to the builders of Solomon's Temple, and through them, to the Templars themselves. Their symbols, the compass, the square, the blazing star, echoed the same geometry carved into Templar architecture. Within Masonic ritual, the idea of a lost word, a hidden truth to be rediscovered, mirrors the legend of the vanished treasure. The treasure was never a hoard to enrich men, but a revelation meant to awaken them. In this way, the story of the Templar treasure becomes something more profound. It is a mirror, reflecting not greed, but the human hunger for mystery. Whether buried in stone, hidden beneath oceans, or encoded in symbols, its power endures because it speaks to something eternal. The belief that there is knowledge lost to us, truths deliberately concealed, waiting to be reclaimed. Perhaps the treasure is still out there, resting in a chamber sealed before the dawn of modern memory. Or perhaps it was never gold or relics, but an idea that true power lies not in possession, but in understanding. Whatever the case, the Templars' secret endured not through coins or jewels, but through faith, imagination, and the unquenchable curiosity of those who still ask the forbidden question: what lies hidden beneath the Temple of Solomon? To understand the secret that bound the Templars, one must return to where their story began: Jerusalem, the heart of the world. In the early 12th century, when the First Crusade wrested the Holy City from Muslim rule, a small band of knights took vows unlike any others. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. It was from this sacred site, the Temple Mount, that they drew both their name and perhaps their destiny. The Temple Mount was not just another holy place. For Jews, it was the site of Solomon's temple, where the Ark of the Covenant once rested, the vessel said to contain the very presence of God. For Muslims, it was the location of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. For Christians, it was a physical bridge to biblical prophecy, a place where heaven had once touched earth. Every stone was heavy with meaning, every shadow with memory. When King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted the newly formed Templars quarters within the Al-Aqsa Mosque around 1119, the knights lived directly above the ruins of Solomon's temple. On the surface, their mission seemed simple: to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. But the reality beneath was far stranger. For nearly a decade, the Templars conducted no significant military campaigns, nor did they recruit heavily. They lived in quiet isolation, a small order of less than a dozen men. Yet they refused to leave the Temple Mount. This silence has long puzzled historians. What were they doing beneath the temple ruins? Chronicles from that era speak of excavations, of secret tunnels, of strange movements under the sacred ground. Arab chroniclers noted that the Templars had dug in the foundations of Solomon's temple for years. And indeed, centuries later, British explorers rediscovered these tunnels, long corridors and hidden chambers beneath the mount, clearly disturbed by medieval tools. Whatever the Templars sought, they worked in secrecy, far from the eyes of both kings and clergy. Some believe they were searching for treasure, relics of the ancient Israelites, perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant itself. According to legend, the Ark had been hidden before the Babylonian conquest in 587 BCE, buried somewhere under the temple complex. The book of Maccabees describes how the prophet Jeremiah concealed sacred items within a mountain cave, declaring that the location would remain secret until the end of days. Could the Templars have found that cave? Others argue that they were not seeking gold or relics, but knowledge, ancient scrolls, or mystical texts left behind by priests of Solomon or even older civilizations. The Temple of Solomon, after all, was said to have been built using wisdom granted by God, and its architecture was steeped in sacred geometry. If the Templars unearthed writings detailing those principles, they might have uncovered the blueprint for divine creation, the hidden science of God's universe. Another possibility lies in the link between the Templars and the Essenes, a Jewish sect that lived near Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered centuries later. The Essenes believed in purity, communal living, and secret initiation, much like the Templars themselves. Some suggest that the Templars found early Christian or Essene texts beneath the Temple Mount, writings that contradicted the Church's narrative about Jesus, perhaps suggesting he was more human than divine, or that he left descendants. Such a revelation would have shaken the foundations of medieval Christendom. If true, it could explain the strange evolution of the Templars after their time in Jerusalem. When they returned to Europe, they were no longer poor monks. Within decades, they became bankers, scholars, architects, and mystics. They built cathedrals aligned to celestial bodies, encoded symbols into stone, and employed mathematics unknown in their age. It was as if they had brought back from Jerusalem not just relics, but enlightenment, a wisdom that merged faith with science, spirit with structure. Consider the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, marvels of light and stone. Many were financed or designed by Templar architects. Their soaring spires, rose windows, and perfect symmetry echo the geometry of Solomon's temple. In their stained glass and hidden carvings appear symbols: the equal-armed cross, the five-pointed star, the flower of life, motifs found in ancient mysticism. These cathedrals were not mere houses of worship. They were instruments of revelation. Through sacred proportion, they were meant to bring man closer to the divine. But with knowledge comes danger. The Church of Rome thrived on control of Scripture, of salvation, of truth. If the Templars had uncovered something that challenged that control, it would explain why they were later branded heretics. Their secrecy was not arrogance, but necessity. To protect what they had found beneath Jerusalem, they needed silence. They could not reveal their discovery, not to kings, not to popes, not even to most of their own brethren. Only the inner circle, the magistracy, would know. And so the Temple Mount became both their birthplace and their burden. Whatever they found beneath its stones, it defined their destiny. It gave them purpose, power, and perhaps a secret worth dying for. When the Church turned against them, that secret became their final shield, hidden away, scattered among those who escaped the flames. Centuries later, excavations beneath the Temple Mount continue to reveal tunnels, sealed chambers, and artifacts from the time of Solomon. But no definitive trace of the Templars' work remains, only silence. Israeli authorities have forbidden deeper exploration of the site, fearing both religious conflict and what might be uncovered. The mystery endures, guarded by politics, faith, and perhaps something more. Some scholars suggest that the true treasure beneath the temple was symbolic, that the Templars had uncovered a deeper understanding of humanity's connection to the divine. The temple itself, in their view, was a metaphor for the human soul, a structure where God could dwell, built not of stone but of wisdom and spirit. To rebuild the temple was not to reconstruct Jerusalem's sanctuary, but to awaken the divine light within mankind. Whether literal or spiritual, the secret beneath the Temple Mount remains one of history's great enigmas. It is the heartbeat of the Templar legend, the origin of their knowledge, their rise, and their fall. And if, as some claim, fragments of that wisdom still lie buried beneath the sacred rock, then perhaps the prophecy of Jacques de Molay still waits to be fulfilled, that one day, when humanity is ready, the hidden truth of the temple will rise again into the light. Deep beneath the great Templar fortresses of Europe, there are places few men have ever seen. Vast stone chambers carved into bedrock, sealed corridors leading to nowhere, and vaults that have never been emptied, nor fully explained. These underground worlds were not just defensive structures. They were designed with a purpose, a secret that may have been the very heart of the Templar mystery. The question that has haunted historians for centuries is simple. What were the Templars hiding in those vaults? Across Europe, from Tomar in Portugal to La Couverture in France, from Temple Brewer in England to Sidon in the Levant, Templar architecture followed a strange and deliberate pattern. Above ground stood the fortress or commandery, a chapel, a barracks, and a great hall. But below it, there were always subterranean chambers, designed with an obsession for symmetry, sacred geometry, and concealment. Many of these spaces were far larger than required for mere storage. Some were circular, echoing the form of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Others were star-shaped, their alignments following celestial constellations. It was as if each fortress was not only a base of operations, but a coded monument, part of a hidden map stretching across Christendom. The Templars were master builders. Their knowledge of engineering and mathematics surpassed that of their contemporaries. They built with precision, ensuring that their walls resisted siege and time itself. Yet their vaults often contained no treasure of gold or jewels. When King Philip IV of France seized their properties in 1307, his agents reported finding nothing of value, only documents, strange symbols, and sealed rooms they could not open. Some even wrote of tunnels that seemed to end in solid stone, as though the builders had meant to mislead intruders. But what if those tunnels did not end? What if behind those walls there were hidden chambers, secret repositories meant to preserve something the Templars could never allow to fall into royal or papal hands? Legends say that in these vaults, the Templars hid the knowledge they had uncovered beneath Jerusalem. It was too dangerous to keep in one place, so they scattered it, encoded in manuscripts, inscribed on stone tablets, concealed in cryptic carvings and floor mosaics. Some even claim that these vaults held relics that defied explanation, fragments of sacred objects, mysterious metals, or bones that were venerated not as saints, but as something older and less human. One of the most enigmatic sites is the Convent of Christ in Tomar, Portugal, the headquarters of the Templar successor order, the Knights of Christ. Beneath its circular church lies a labyrinth of passages that have never been fully mapped. Some sections were deliberately filled with rubble centuries ago, as if to seal them forever. Local tradition claims that a Grail room lies hidden somewhere under the complex, a chamber containing the relic that the Templars brought back from the Holy Land. Whether that relic was the Holy Grail, the Ark, or was something else entirely, none can say. Equally mysterious is the fortress of Chinon in France, the site where the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was imprisoned before his execution. When archaeologists excavated its lower levels in the 20th century, they discovered strange carvings on the stone walls. Crosses, circles, and geometric symbols unlike anything in medieval Christian art. Some bore inscriptions in Latin and Greek, but others seemed written in a code, possibly an ancient cipher preserved from their time in the East. Were these desperate prayers from doomed knights, or encrypted messages left for those who would come after them? The Templar vaults also served another, more practical purpose, as banks. The order's immense wealth was not stored as coins, but as documents, promissory notes, coded ledgers, and contracts. Their underground chambers were effectively the world's first safe deposit vaults. Yet this system of secrecy extended beyond economics. Even the scribes who maintained the records often did not understand the full meaning of the symbols and seals they copied. The vaults themselves became temples of silence, repositories of both material and spiritual power. And in the years following their suppression, these vaults became tombs. As the Templars were hunted, many fled across Europe, taking with them fragments of the order's secrets. Those who could not flee sealed their knowledge behind walls and beneath floors, trusting that someday their brethren, or perhaps mankind itself, would be ready to rediscover it. In some abandoned commanderies, sealed rooms were found centuries later containing skeletons seated in prayer, still clad in armor. It was as if those knights had chosen to die guarding their mystery. Modern excavations have only deepened the enigma. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed anomalies beneath several known Templar sites. Cavities too regular to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. Yet governments and the Church have often restricted further investigation. In many countries, Templar ruins are protected heritage sites, and unauthorized digging is forbidden. Some believe this is mere preservation policy. Others suspect it is part of a long-standing effort to keep what lies beneath untouched. If the Templar vaults truly contain knowledge beyond their time, it may explain the transformation that occurred in Europe after their fall. Within decades, new movements emerged: the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and alchemists, each echoing Templar symbols, architecture, and ideals. Their temples, too, were built with hidden chambers, underground halls, and secret vaults. It was as if the Templar legacy had gone to ground, waiting patiently for its rebirth. Perhaps the greatest clue lies not in the vaults themselves, but in what they represent. For the Templars, stone and earth were not barriers, but vessels, physical embodiments of divine order. To build below the surface was to descend into the hidden realm of the spirit, the place where truth is buried beneath illusion. Their vaults were both literal and symbolic. They concealed secrets from the unworthy, but also invited the initiate to seek enlightenment through descent and discovery. In that sense, the Templar vaults are less about what they contained and more about what they meant. They represent the eternal human search for the hidden truth, a journey into the depths, both physical and spiritual. Each stone, each tunnel, each symbol carved in the dark whispers the same message: that knowledge, once found, must be protected, and that the path to light always begins underground. Even now, beneath the ruins of Europe, those silent chambers remain, sealed, untouched, patient. Whether they guard relics of unimaginable power or nothing but dust, they still hold their power over us. For as long as the vaults of the Templars remain unbroken, the mystery endures, a secret preserved in stone, waiting for the day it is meant to be found. When the flames consumed the last Grand Master in Paris and the Templar order was declared dissolved, it seemed as though their story had ended. But in truth, the Templars did not vanish. They transformed. Across Europe, fragments of their brotherhood survived, slipping silently into the shadows of history. Some fled to kingdoms that refused to bow to papal pressure. Others changed their names, concealed their symbols, and hid their rituals beneath new banners. What emerged from this dispersal was not merely a scattered remnant of exiled knights, but something far more enduring, a secret brotherhood, one that may have continued to shape the world long after the Templar crosses were torn down. The Church and the Crown sought to erase the Templars entirely. Their lands were confiscated, their leaders executed, their archives seized. Yet the speed of their suppression was suspicious. It was too well-coordinated, too precise, as though someone had known in advance exactly where to strike. The knights themselves seemed to vanish with unnatural efficiency, as if prepared for the blow. What if the Templars had foreseen their own downfall? What if they had already begun their transformation before that fateful dawn in 1307? Rumors from Portugal tell of how King Denis, defying the papal order, welcomed the exiled Templars under a new name, the Order of Christ. Outwardly, it appeared to be a new chivalric order loyal to the crown, but its members, its rituals, and its symbols were almost identical to those of the Templars. The Red Cross persisted, now slightly altered. The vows of secrecy and brotherhood remained, and under this new guise, the order thrived, funding voyages of discovery that would eventually reshape the world. It was the Order of Christ that sponsored Prince Henry the Navigator, whose explorations began the Age of Discovery. Through them, the old Templar dream of expansion, not by sword, but by knowledge, was reborn. In Scotland, too, whispers grew of knights who had escaped by sea, carrying with them relics and treasures from France. Local legends say they found refuge with Robert the Bruce, whose excommunication by the Pope made him a natural ally. Some even claim that Templar knights fought beside the Scots at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, the very year Jacques de Molay was executed. After the victory, Bruce is said to have rewarded them with land and protection, allowing their traditions to survive in secrecy. From these Scottish roots, many historians trace the later emergence of the Freemasons, a fraternity whose architecture, symbols, and rituals echo those of the vanished Templars. In France, the Templar spirit took another path. Many of their initiates joined secret societies that blended Christian mysticism with ancient philosophy. Alchemists, astrologers, and scholars claimed descent from the poor Knights of Christ, preserving fragments of their teachings through coded manuscripts. One such group was said to have met in secrecy near Rennes-le-Château, centuries before the site became infamous for its own mysteries. These hidden brotherhoods saw themselves as guardians of sacred lineage, one that stretched back not just to the Crusades, but to a wisdom far older. The symbols of the Templars, the double-headed eagle, the red cross, the compass and square, began to reappear in unexpected places, on medieval cathedrals, in Renaissance manuscripts, on the seals of explorers and kings. Each appearance was subtle, but deliberate, as though a silent hand was guiding history. The Renaissance itself, that explosion of art, science, and humanism, carried the same reverence for geometry, balance, and divine proportion that had defined Templar architecture. It is as if the secret brotherhood, though unseen, was still building temples, only now in the form of knowledge and discovery. But what did they truly believe? The original Templars had been monks as well as warriors, bound by vows of poverty and obedience. Yet beneath their devotion to the Church, they had always harbored a deeper curiosity, one that questioned dogma and sought the divine through understanding rather than submission. The secret brotherhood that followed carried this spirit forward. Their teachings combined faith with reason, mysticism with science. They saw God not only in the church or the cross, but in the order of the universe itself, in mathematics, music, and the movement of the stars. To them, truth was a sacred code waiting to be deciphered. Throughout the centuries, the shadow of the Templars can be found wherever power and knowledge intersect. The Freemasons of the 17th and 18th centuries adopted many of their emblems and initiatory rites, invoking Solomon's temple and the mysteries of light and darkness, concepts deeply rooted in Templar lore. The Rosicrucians spoke of secret masters guiding humanity's evolution from behind the veil of history. Even the Illuminati, centuries later, echoed the Templar vision of enlightenment through hidden wisdom. Whether coincidence or continuity, the parallels are too precise to ignore. One of the most compelling theories suggests that this secret brotherhood influenced the very birth of modern democracy and science. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, first articulated in the Enlightenment, bear a striking resemblance to the Templar code of brotherhood and merit. Many of the founding fathers of the United States were Freemasons, and through them, the symbolic language of the Templars, the eye within the triangle, the unfinished pyramid, the quest for divine illumination, became woven into the fabric of the modern world. And yet, the Brotherhood remained hidden. Its members worked not as conquerors, but as builders of cathedrals of nations of ideas. They understood that true power does not lie in crowns or armies, but in symbols and knowledge that endure across ages. Through them, the Templar legacy was never lost, only transmuted, refined into new forms. There are those who claim that this brotherhood still exists today, not as a single organization, but as a lineage, a chain of initiates who guard the wisdom once unearthed beneath the Temple of Solomon. Some believe they continue to guide humanity toward enlightenment, subtly steering history's course through art, science, and politics. Others see them as puppet masters, manipulating events for hidden ends. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between myth and reality. What is certain is that the flame lit by the Templars never truly died. It passed from hand to hand, order to order, century to century, a secret light preserved through the darkness of time. And if that brotherhood still walks among us, unseen and unnamed, then the prophecy of the Templars, that one day their truth would rise again, may already be unfolding. For the world we live in, shaped by exploration, architecture, and the pursuit of hidden knowledge, still bears the fingerprints of that ancient order. The knights may have fallen, their fortresses turned to ruin, but their vision endures, encoded in stone, in symbol, and perhaps in the hearts of those who still seek the light they once guarded so fiercely. Among the scattered relics of the Templars, one artifact stands apart. A parchment said to contain a prophecy so dangerous that it was hidden away, sealed beneath layers of secrecy for centuries. Known only in fragments, whispered in the margins of forbidden texts, it spoke of a hidden temple, not of stone and mortar, but of knowledge, buried beneath Jerusalem and guarded by oaths older than Christendom itself. To the Church, such words were blasphemy. To the initiated, it was revelation. The prophecy foretold not the end of the Templars, but their transformation, and the return of their secret when the world was ready to understand it. The story begins in Jerusalem, within the very heart of the ancient city. When the first Templar Knights arrived in 1119, they were granted quarters on the Temple Mount, the holiest and most contested ground on earth. Officially, they were there to protect pilgrims. Unofficially, they began to dig. Beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple, they tunneled into chambers that had lain sealed for nearly 2 millennia. What they found there changed the course of their order forever. The records of that discovery were never made public. The Vatican archives, even today, contain only vague references to materials of sacred significance recovered by the early Templars. But fragments of letters and oral traditions suggest they unearthed scrolls, writings that predated both Judaism and Christianity. These texts spoke of an ancient covenant, a bond between heaven and earth maintained by those who built the first temple. But the most unsettling detail was this. The temple described was not merely a building, but a design, a map of the human soul, mirrored in the structure of the cosmos itself. The prophecy found among these writings warned that when mankind lost sight of this divine order, the temple would be destroyed, not once, but twice. Yet it also promised that in the age of iron and fire, when empires fell and faith grew hollow, the temple would rise again. Not in Jerusalem, but within humanity's awakening understanding of truth. It was said that those who held the secret of this temple would guide that awakening. The Templars, believing themselves chosen as its guardians, began to see their mission in a new light. They were no longer merely knights of the Church. They were keepers of a cosmic design. This revelation reshaped their entire order. The Templar architecture that spread across Europe bore the same proportions as the ruins beneath Jerusalem. Circular chapels, 12 supporting columns, sacred geometries woven into their stonework. Each commandery became a reflection of the hidden temple, a symbolic replica meant to preserve the pattern they had uncovered. The knowledge was encoded, not written in words but carved into form, visible only to those who understood its meaning. But with revelation came danger. The Church could tolerate no teaching that placed divine truth outside its control. If the prophecy was genuine, it undermined the very foundations of papal authority. The Templars, once celebrated as defenders of faith, became suspect, their secrecy interpreted as heresy, their knowledge as sorcery. In the years before their fall, rumors spread that they worshipped a mysterious head, a relic they called Baphomet. To their accusers, it was a demon. But to the Templars, perhaps it symbolized something else: the reconciliation of opposites, the unity of spirit and matter, the secret of the hidden temple made flesh. When Jacques de Molay was arrested, it is said that a sealed chest was taken from the Paris temple and vanished before it could be seized by the king's men. Some believe it contained gold or relics. Others claim it held the original prophecy, the document that had guided the order since Jerusalem. Its disappearance marked the beginning of centuries of speculation. For wherever the prophecy went, so too went the heart of the Templar secret. Over time, echoes of the prophecy appeared in unexpected places. Renaissance scholars spoke of a temple of the world built not by human hands but by divine law. The Hermetic philosophers wrote of a time when hidden wisdom would be revealed to all mankind. Even Isaac Newton, known to history as a man of science, spent decades studying the dimensions of Solomon's temple, convinced that its architecture concealed a universal code. Could he have been following the same thread the Templars once held? The prophecy, in its essence, seems to foretell cycles of destruction and rebirth, not just of temples and civilizations, but of knowledge itself. The Templars believed that truth cannot be destroyed, only buried, and that every age has its chosen guardians. When the flames of ignorance rise, the hidden temple sleeps. When the light of reason returns, it awakens. In this way, the prophecy was not merely about buildings or relics, but about the destiny of humanity itself. Some modern esoteric traditions claim that the prophecy's final lines spoke of a great unveiling. When the sword is turned inward and the stone is broken, the light within shall speak once more. Interpretations vary. Some say it predicts a spiritual awakening, others a catastrophic event that will force humanity to confront its forgotten past. A few even connect it to the discovery of new technologies or lost civilizations buried beneath the sands of time. Whatever the meaning, the words carry the same haunting promise that one day, the secret of the hidden temple will return. In recent years, archaeologists have uncovered mysterious structures beneath the Temple Mount that align with the descriptions found in old Templar accounts. Sealed chambers, symmetrical tunnels, carved pillars showing both Jewish and pagan symbols. The discoveries are kept under tight control, with access restricted for political and religious reasons. Yet whispers persist that something was indeed found, something that could alter our understanding of history and faith alike. If the prophecy is true, then perhaps the Templars' greatest secret was never about treasure or relics at all. It was about knowledge, the kind that transcends religion, empire, and even time itself. Their mission was not to rule or to conquer, but to protect the divine pattern until humanity was ready to comprehend it. And so, the legend endures that beneath the sands of Jerusalem, beyond the reach of kings and popes, lies a design, a sacred geometry that binds heaven and earth. The prophecy of the hidden temple remains unfulfilled, its meaning scattered across the stones, and symbols left behind by those who once called themselves the poor knights of Christ. Perhaps one day, when the world again seeks truth over power, the temple will rise, not from the ground, but from the mind and soul of humanity itself. Then, at last, the Templar prophecy will speak again, and the secret buried beneath Jerusalem will no longer be forbidden, but revealed. Through the centuries, one rumor has outlived kings, empires, and even the church itself. The belief that the Knights Templar guarded not a cup, but a bloodline. The so-called Holy Grail, in this version of the legend, was not an object of gold or stone, but the living descendants of a sacred union, a lineage said to begin with Jesus of Nazareth and Mary Magdalene. It was this secret, the story claims, that the Templars discovered beneath the Temple of Solomon. And it was this truth, if ever revealed, that could have torn Christendom apart. To the medieval mind, the idea of such a bloodline was unthinkable, even heretical. Yet hints of it appeared throughout Templar lore. Their devotion to the feminine figure, often represented as the divine Sophia or Our Lady of Light, was unusual for a military order sworn to celibacy. Their churches were often circular, echoing not just the Holy Sepulchre, but also the womb, symbol of creation and rebirth. And in their secret rites, some chroniclers claimed they honored a mysterious head or idol, possibly representing the sacred feminine or the union of opposites. The Church, unable to comprehend such symbolism, branded it as idolatry. But perhaps it was something far deeper, a hidden theology preserved through symbol and ritual. The Grail legend, as we know it, first appeared in the late 12th century, during the Templars' height of power. Chrétien de Troyes Perceval told of a knight's quest to find a vessel that could heal the wounded king and restore the land. Later poets added strange details: a bleeding lance, a mysterious procession, and guardians known as keepers of the Grail. These stories were filled with coded language and veiled references to initiation and enlightenment. Many scholars now believe that the Grail romances were allegories, metaphors for the same secret knowledge the Templars guarded in silence. If the Grail represented a bloodline, its guardianship was both sacred and perilous. For such a truth, if known, would undermine the authority of the Church, which claimed divine right through spiritual succession, not human descent. A living bloodline of Christ would mean that divinity was not confined to priests and popes, but carried in human veins, a revelation that could dismantle the entire structure of medieval faith. The idea gained further life in later centuries, when the suppressed Templar traditions resurfaced in secret circles. Renaissance mystics, Gnostic sects, and later Freemasonic lodges all referenced a royal blood or sang real, a phrase that, when spoken aloud, sounds identical to Saint Graal, the Holy Grail. Whether coincidence or deliberate wordplay, the connection was irresistible. Sang real, the royal blood, became the hidden meaning of the Grail itself. According to one enduring tradition, the Templars discovered ancient documents beneath the Temple Mount, genealogies and records connecting Mary Magdalene to a royal lineage in the Near East. These texts, it is said, prove that after the crucifixion, she fled Jerusalem with her child and found refuge in the south of France, in the region of Languedoc. There, her descendants intermarried with the Merovingian kings, the earliest rulers of what would become France. This bloodline, blending the sacred and the royal, became the foundation for the myth of the Rex Deus, the divine kings who carried the legacy of the Grail. The Templars, who held vast estates in that very region, would have been well aware of these traditions. Many of their most powerful patrons, the families of Toulouse, Foy, and Aragon, were connected to the Cathars, a heretical sect that venerated Mary Magdalene as the true apostle of Christ. The Cathars were exterminated in the Albigensian Crusade, a campaign endorsed by the same church that later destroyed the Templars. It is tempting to wonder if the two persecutions were linked, if the church sought not only to crush heresy, but to bury a truth that threatened its very foundation. In this telling, the Grail was not an artifact to be found, but a lineage to be protected. The Templars, bound by secrecy, became its guardians. Their fortresses in France, England, and the Holy Land were not merely military bastions, but sanctuaries for blood and knowledge. Some believe that before their fall, the Templars smuggled members of this lineage, or the records proving it, to safe havens in Scotland and Portugal. From there, the secret may have survived, hidden within later brotherhoods that inherited the Templar mission under new names. Even after the Templars' destruction, the Grail myth continued to evolve in poetry, art, and secret philosophy. The imagery of the chalice persisted, but its meaning shifted. For alchemists, the Grail became the vessel of transformation, the union of opposites, the marriage of the sun and moon. For mystics, it symbolized divine wisdom concealed within human form. And for those who claimed to know the hidden lineage, it remained the proof that divinity could dwell in flesh, that the sacred was not something distant and unreachable, but incarnate in humanity itself. In the 20th century, the idea of the Grail as a bloodline reemerged with explosive force. Writers and historians, drawing from old Templar myths and suppressed gospels, suggested that the descendants of this lineage still existed, their identity hidden behind centuries of secrecy and political maneuvering. Some claimed that secret societies, including remnants of the Templar order, were formed to protect them. Others believed that the bloodline had quietly influenced history, ensuring the preservation of ancient wisdom through key families and leaders. Skeptics dismissed it all as legend, a romantic fantasy woven from fragments of myth and medieval symbolism. Yet the persistence of the story across time and culture remains remarkable. It continues to fascinate because it speaks to something profound within the human spirit, the idea that divinity is not confined to the heavens, but lives within us. The Grail, in this light, becomes a mirror rather than a cup, reflecting the hidden potential of humankind. Perhaps this was the true revelation the Templars uncovered, that the kingdom of God was not above but within, that sacred blood flows through all people, and that the divine can be found not in churches or relics, but in the living lineage of humanity itself. If this was the secret they guarded, it would explain their silence and their destruction, for such a truth would make kings and popes irrelevant. It would shatter hierarchies and unite the sacred with the human. And so the Templars fell, their voices silenced, their knowledge scattered. But their legend endures, the legend of the Grail, of the bloodline, of the hidden truth buried beneath centuries of dogma. Whether real or imagined, the story still stirs something ancient in the soul, a longing to know that the divine is not lost, but alive, carried quietly within us, awaiting rediscovery. For perhaps the true Grail has never been a relic to find, but a truth to remember.